Welcome once again to Cinemaholics. I'm John Negroni from the San Francisco Bay Area, not Park City, Utah. That's right, because we're talking about Sundance, and it was virtual this year. With me, I, of course, have the Cinemaholics co-host, co-founder, co-conspirator, and freelance film critic, Will Ashton. Will, hey.
Hey. I didn't realize I was getting so many titles, but yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I see you're like dusting off the snow. You just got off the slopes.
Sure, I'm a man of many titles. I'm a man of many places, I guess, virtually in this scenario.
That's right. Yeah, this is a big episode. This is one of my favorite episodes we do all year because we get to talk about my favorite film festival. That's right, Sundance.
This is your all-time favorite festival right here.
This is my favorite festival every year. I think I've mentioned it on the show, or I've mentioned it in in other things before, but this is like one of my favorite times of the year. You know, it's like right after Christmas. Holidays aren't over for me. I still got one more in the tank, and that's Sundance. Also Chinese New Year, celebrating that this coming week. But yeah, January, taking it back. January used to be like the worst. Like I remember when I was a younger film person, we hated January. January sucked. Like no good movies coming out really, unless you're like looking for art house favorites. We probably already saw them in December. But now we have Sundance. Wow. Now we have all these other things coming out. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, as you were mentioning, I feel like for me, I always associate January with catching up with some of the best films of the previous year, along with seeing, just the most like generic stuff that Hollywood barely gave a second thought to, stuff that just came out seemingly at random throughout the year, and you just kind of get those two back and forth. It's a very whiplash cinematic experience of getting basically the best of last year and the worst of this upcoming year at 1 month. It's kind of an incredible month for movies in that way.
Let's talk about Sundance in a little bit more detail. Now, we've covered Sundance plenty of times here on the show. I mean, we've covered it every year since 2018. The only time we didn't cover it was our first year because we're coming up on our 5th anniversary of doing the show, 2017. And I just remember we didn't talk about Sundance because we had just started the show. Neither of us attended the festival, and we started it in like February. Sundance was already like over. So I remember we talked about I think we were talking about like SAG Awards and stuff like that, like right before we started the podcast.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't think we really got into it. 2018 was different.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, I'm sure we talked about the movies that were at Sundance throughout the year, just not in one concrete episode.
Sure. I want to say we had on like a guest, like I think we may have had Alex Billington on to talk about Sundance, but that was about it, right?
Right.
Now I've been attending Sundance since 2018, and it's for me, it's like gotten bigger and bigger every year, like more and more films covered. And like I've said before, I love Sundance. I miss attending in person. And for listeners who don't really I didn't want to bring this up because I don't know if we talk about it often, but like what's the big deal with Sundance? For listeners who don't know, Sundance is one of the big 5 film festivals. It's one of the biggest film festivals in the world. It's the biggest one in the United States. And I guess that makes it the second biggest in North America. So the big 5 include Cannes, right? And Cannes is like the most prestigious for most people. Berlin or Berlinale, that's the biggest. Like the most people go to that one. And then
that one is that's happening. I think when people are listening to this episode, it starts this week, right?
It's coming up, yeah. And depending on the exact dates, but yeah, also a big festival. We also have Venice is the other one, and Toronto. And Venice and Toronto they happen later in the year. We have a bunch of other like smaller film festivals, but like also pretty big. Like we have South by Southwest, which is up there. Like it's not that far away from Sundance, and it's been gaining more and more prestige over the years. And there are lots of smaller, film festivals. Like we have like San Francisco, we have an international film festival. I know you have film festivals out there near Pittsburgh that you like to go to. I guess the difference though is that that's like the festival circuit. We don't get tons of like world premieres and everything to those ones. We might get like
those,
one,
yeah. Those are, comparatively, like, those are kind of for people like us, like we can catch up on movies that were at Venice, movies that were at TIFF that we didn't get a chance to see because we weren't at those festivals usually. So that's a chance for us to catch up on those films. But yeah, in terms of premieres and actually getting what often become some of the bigger films of the year in America, Sundance is the place to be.
Exactly. And I think one thing that kind of sets Sundance apart too is that I think that it technically is like the biggest film festival for independent films and independent filmmakers. And the Sundance Institute is like totally dedicated to helping people who are like indie directors like get their first movie. So what's cool about Sundance is there's a lot of discovery with this festival. You get to see a lot of first time filmmakers, a lot of debut films. You get that too in other film festivals, but they tend to not be like the centerpiece films. Like by the time you get to Toronto, for example, a lot of those films are like big films from pretty well-known actors that are getting all the attention. And like, for example, like Dune, Belfast, stuff like that.
But I mean, like if you're talking the history of Sundance, like you wouldn't have a Quentin Tarantino without Sundance. No, you wouldn't have Robert Rodriguez. You wouldn't
Sundance is the vanguard of indie filmmaking. Yeah.
Damien Chazelle, Ryan Coogler, those are just like obviously a handful of names, but they all got their start and became prominent. Or Kevin Smith, I know obviously that's a big success story there. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the most prominent, notable names in American cinema got their start because of Sundance and because their films came to prominence through Sundance. And a lot of times in those cases, they are filmmakers, who aren't of note before the festival begins. Their film comes out, gets award recognition and all this stuff. And then, sure enough, they get the keys to a lot of blockbusters and stuff. So in a grand sense like that, a lot of times these filmmakers get noticed through the festival and become big names later on in the decades to come because of this festival. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest one of the best filmmakers of all time, Martin Scorsese. Like first Sundance was Mean Streets, that's when that came out. So like for sure, late 70s was such an indie films in general didn't really come into their own really until the 90s. And what we mean is like before that time, this stuff really had to go through the Hollywood system. But what's so great about Sundance is it kind of started out as like, hey, we're going to bring in more attention to like American filmmaking, but like making American filmmaking kind of have that same like prestige and acclaim that we're seeing, in France, we're seeing at these other places because of the French New Wave, because of Italian cinema. And yeah, I think, also Midnight Cowboy was the first Sundance too, I want to say, and Streetcar Named Desire, a couple of more like pretty notable films.
I didn't know that actually, to be honest. Yeah,
it wasn't always called Sundance. It was the U.S. Film Festival. It was later called Sundance, and obviously a reference to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Robert Redford was like co-founder sort of like the first iteration and all that, but we're not going to talk about the history of Sundance. The point is that Sundance is really, really important, for a lot of filmmakers. And I think the most important thing about it, or one of the key things it brings to the year in cinema, is that it's the first major film festival of the year, lots of world premieres, and it tends to really set the tone for the year in film. It really does. Even in a year like 2020, when that was the last time I attended in person, it was right a couple months before COVID, we still, saw a lot of those films find their way to platforms over the course of like 2 years. And they were in some ways fairly prescient of what was to come. And so it's a great festival to attend if you really want to get a sense of what's in store for the year in film. And I think we can say that that's going to be the case with this festival, most likely.
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't get to attend either in person or virtually, if you even just keep your ear to the ground, you tend to get a pretty good idea of what's going to be some of the most notable films of the year to come, or the years to come in cases like, sometimes these movies take a year or two to come out. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of some of the most notable movies from the past few years that have come out through Sundance. I know there's like The Witch, Get Out, Whiplash, what are some other ones? Coda from last year.
Call Me by Your Name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of these, films that either get critical or commercial attention, but even going back, like something like Blair Witch Project or like, didn't Paranormal Activity, the first one, premiere Sundance?
I don't think so. I think you're thinking of Blair Witch Project. Let me fact check it.
I know Blair Witch Project for sure was at Sundance. That's like where it has.
I mean, it's one of the like big Sundance stories. You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's like right up there with like Clerks and Reservoir Dogs and El Mariachi, having like coming out of nowhere, costing a couple $1,000s, and then basically changing cinema as we know it for the decade or two to come. And unfortunately, I don't think the festival has had that same spark as they've had since the 90s, but at the same time, they do, like we say, have a lot of these films that, whether we recognize them in full or not, tend to really shake things up and leave a big impression for cinema in the years to come. So yeah.
I fact checked it.
Okay.
Paranormal Activity, it premiered at the Screamfest Horror Film Festival on October 14th, 2007, day after my birthday.
Oh, wow.
And
Happy birthday.
it was shown at Slamdance the following year. So yeah, you were adjacent there. So it didn't premiere at Sundance, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's what I was probably thinking of. Like, good fact checking.
Hey, we did it. And yeah, Slamdance is just kind of like an offshoot of Sundance. It's dedicated to like emerging artists, and it takes place usually like right after. So it's kind of going on like right now. But yeah, it's for like very micro budget, low budget indies, like even more indie than Sundance. And that is something interesting about this year that I wanted to bring up because we're going to talk about what we thought of the year in general for sure. But I want to say, like, comparing the 2 years, there definitely was like, there were a few differences of like the kinds of films we saw in terms of like how buzzy they were. So I should probably set the stage here a little bit, right? So what are some like, what is your typical Sundance film? I think there are like a few. Sundance is kind of interesting because you can sort of like scientifically categorize a lot of these films. Obviously, there are tons of outliers, but I think there are some sort of like movies you would expect. Like this is this is a Sundance movie, this is that. One of the most prominent is Sundance is considered by a lot of people to be the best film festival for documentaries. A lot of the best documentaries tend to come out at this festival, which I love because I love documentaries.
Well,
and there are two types of documentaries, like two main types we tend to get at Sundance. There's certainly a bunch that fit where we are. There's like the pop culture curiosity documentary. So like this year, that includes like the Kanye West, documentary.
Mm-hmm.
We had the Taylor Swift Mistress Americana that one year. Also this year, we had Princess Diana, a documentary for her. We had a documentary for Lucy, I Love Lucy and Desi. We also had one of the big ones was We Need to Talk About Cosby, the Bill Cosby documentary that's, I think, like just premiered actually. So it's like back Showtime release. So like that's one kind. The other kind of, go ahead.
Well, when you say curiosity, I was thinking more like, didn't Tickled premiere at Sundance?
Well, yeah. I was going to mention like Tickled is a good example of that. And then also like sometimes you get like, hey, here's a documentary about something that happened in like the 90s that it's like super specific, like McMillions or... That's kind of what I'm getting at.
King of Kong is a good example.
Yeah. There's another one that I'm forgetting that was
Super Size Me
year.
At the Sundance?
I don't remember, but
I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It seems like a Sundance premiere.
Yeah,
I'll look it up.
There's all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, it's like the Ren and Stimpy documentary, from a few years ago. Like it's just like these very like specific like pop culture things. The other kind of documentary we tend to see, and these are the ones that usually win the prizes, are the sort of political documentaries, the like social progress, social action. Your films like Boy State and Knock Down the House and stuff like that. This year, those ones are like To the End, which you just saw. I haven't seen. The two that I want to talk about later, so I won't mention them yet, but they're two of my favorite documentaries of the whole festival. But yeah, we get a bunch of those. One of them was Downfall: The Case Against Boeing, which I thought was it's not even that political of a documentary. It's kind of like a mix of the two because it's more about like how, it is political in the obvious sense, but it's taking like what happened with the Boeing airplanes when they disappeared or like they were like falling out of the sky and like uncovering like what Boeing did to sort of cover that up and what led to it. And it's a very sad documentary in the sense of like, I cannot believe that this happened. But yeah, that is a very specific type of documentary we tend to get. Am I forgetting anything? Oh, well, The American Dream and Other Fairy Tales. That was another one I saw this year. Yeah, that's the one about Abigail Disney. She made a film about the Disney company that she considers to be like terrible working conditions, labor conditions for the people who work at the parks. Sorry.
Yeah, I was interested to see that one. I got a screener for it. I don't know if it expired yet. So I may be able to get a chance to see that later this week. I was definitely curious about it. But I was looking up more curiosity documentaries. I did look it up Super Size Me did premiere at Sundance. So did March the Penguins and like Blackfish. Like those movies that like the type of documentaries where it's like, oh, have you heard about so and so, that kind of like build a spark later on in the year and become, you know, back in the day, a big thing. Or like Inconvenient Truth, I think was also at Sundance for the premiere. So those are the type of documentaries that tend to premiere first at Sundance and then gain notice or, you know, infamy or whatever you want to call it later on when they premiere later in the year for a general public.
Another type of film we tend to get, we do get a lot of indie films, which is great. You know, every year we tend to get like films made by filmmakers all over the world. We get really interesting ones about like cultures and, you know, people groups that we don't typically see in films. So it's a great festival to check out international cinema for sure. But there are sort of like the big Sundance favorites, you know, the sort of like crowd pleasing, feel good, not fully art house, not blockbuster, kind of like an in-between sort of film. So like last year that was Coda, you know, one year it might be like Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, you know, that one I guess because it was about movies, you know. I think one of the like big examples of this from years ago was like Little Miss Sunshine. Like that's kind of a running gag, right? It's like that is a Sundance movie and like people compare, you know.
I mean, I made the joke already, but I feel like Garden State is the type of Sundance movie that gets a lot when it premieres, then becomes kind of a joke later on. Even though, as I was saying in our little Sundance group chat, I still have a soft spot for Garden State. I'm sorry, I'm that guy.
It's a great movie, and I'm
sorry, I'm that guy. I like the movie.
Me too.
I recognize the faults. Yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to defend any other movies on Zach Braff's filmography, but
same here.
Whatever, that I can see why people like that movie and fell over, you know, head over heels in love with that movie when it premiered, but whatever.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun when we do the Zach Braff episode of Cinemaholics.
Well, he has a new movie coming out. If you can believe it, he directed a movie with Florence Pugh.
Wow. When did they find the time?
I know. I mean, like, what are the odds that they found each other?
Now, this year, we don't really have like a coda like that, really. Like, we have Cha Cha Real Smooth, which I have a feeling we might talk about more. That's like the film that like won, you know, one of the big prizes.
The audience award.
It won the audience award. And, you know, it also, like Coda, was bought by Apple. Now, I would say that it's kind of different, though, from like a kind of Coda sort of movie. It's kind of different from like Minari was sort of that for 2019. You know, these sort of like A24 adjacent movies. Yeah. I mean, Minari was A24, but...
Yes. I mean, I don't know. I don't see quite the big differences that you do between Coda and Cha Cha Real Smooth. And we were having an argument earlier. I proposed the idea that Apple would at least consider buying Cha Cha Real Smooth, considering that they bought Coda. And you're like, oh, no, that's prepossible.
I did not say it was impossible. You just really
how would that even happen?
You correctly like predicted that. I don't know. To me... Something about Cha Cha Real Smooth, it seemed maybe I misread the film or something, because I did not take it as like the sort of like it is lighthearted, I guess, but I don't know. I didn't get the sort of Coda vibes. I didn't get the sort of like this is something like when I think of like Apple stuff, I tend to think of like this is a bit more of like a semi more serious NBC sort of production, you know?
Yeah, and that's what Cha Cha Real Smooth is basically, in my opinion. I mean, what could you not see an audience who's really into This Is Us?
I guess I see it more as like an FX sort of thing. I don't know.
I'm not quite sure where you're coming from with that. I think it makes complete sense, but I don't know.
We will be talking more about Cha Cha Real Smooth. I mean, that is one of the most talked about films of the festival, and
sure.
Other than that, I mean, there tends to also be sort of like we tend to see like more stories directed by women in this festival than many other festivals, which is really great. Sundance has a better track record. Still, I don't think it's like, you know, at that level where it's like as like statistically like equitable as it should be.
Well, but I was going to ask. Because I mean, at least for me, I noticed that tallying all the movies I saw more movies directed or co-directed by women than men this year. And I don't know if that was because of the movies I picked or saw, or if that was because the festival included more films directed or co-directed by women. You should
program film festivals, Wash, and you're clearly good at it. I think you're...
no. I mean, just like, it's not... I'm not bragging about it. I'm asking, like, I didn't know.
I know you're not bragging, but I'm still impressed.
Sure. I just didn't know, because last year, I think... It was mostly the opposite. Like, I mean, I saw quite a few films directed by women, but it was more men than women overall. And this year it was significantly the other way around. So I didn't know if that was the festival, if that was me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this year, one of the bigger films that was directed by a woman and had a little bit of buzz behind it was Am I Okay? Another Dakota Johnson movie. Dakota Johnson and Cha Cha Real Smooth, also in I'm Okay. And that's the directorial debut of Tig Notaro. And I think her wife is like a co-filmmaker, worked on the screenplay.
Yeah, she's also... Yeah, no, they both directed the film, yes.
They both directed, okay. Yes. Stephanie something. I can't remember her last name. We're going to look it up. Am I okay?
Aline?
Stephanie Aline. Aline. Yeah, it's spelled Allynne. And it was it was written by Lauren Pomerantz. So okay, that's now we have the full picture. This was like a sort of comedic film, kind of like a romantic dramedy. That's what I was searching for. There tends to be there are a lot of Sundance films that are romantic dramedies. Right. Last year was like together, sort of, although it wasn't very romantic. But Am I Okay is kind of the same way, where it's more about like a platonic sort of relationship with like romantic implications. Yeah.
It's like playing into the romantic comedy tropes or subverting them, I guess, but not indulging in those expectations overall.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as saying subverting, but I would say like it plays with the tropes. Like it's aware that you know of the tropes. Yeah.
Well, maybe not so much with Together, but I definitely think that's the case with Am I Okay? Because like there are certain characters in this movie that, like Jeremy Fowler's character, he's like kind of playing into the expectations of the like quote unquote gay best friend character. But the joke or like the twist in this case is that he's actually straight and he's the partner of one of the lead characters in this movie. But like his mannerisms and like the way he plays the character is like what you would expect from a gay best friend stereotype in a romantic comedy. And it becomes not really subversive or progressive, but it's like a twist on that expectation.
But yeah, it's a little bit of a quirk. It's something that you could easily miss, which kind of makes me sad you're not watching the After Party, the Apple show, which kind of like I'm not playing with film genres and stuff like that.
I'm not avoiding it. I just have been knee deep in Sundance.
I got you. I mean, it did just come out. I'm not shaming you or anything, but so all that said, there clearly is like a certain type of energy behind Sundance films. Let's talk about actually experiencing the festival itself this year. Now, I kind of alluded to this earlier. Sundance, since last year, starting with 2021, has had an all virtual format because pandemic started March 2020. So obviously pandemic, pre-pandemic was 2020's Sundance. It was like the only, like that in Berlin, like the only major ones that, still were like kind of normal. Now, starting with 2021, Sundance did it all virtual. And it was a little different last year. Last year, for those of us who are accredited and do it through press, last year was interesting because we had like an unlimited amount of like, premieres that we could do on their schedule.
There was a limit, but like basically you'd have to like not sleep for a week to surpass.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you could do them one after another, right?
Right.
And so you could like start one, and then you had a window, and you could literally just program watching movies constantly every day. But then that you had a limited amount of second screenings, and so second screenings are just sort of they're the films that like already had their premiere day, but then you have like a second chance to watch them later. So like if you didn't watch something the day that it premiered, maybe you got some buzz. People were like, oh, hey, you should check this out. Like, and then you're like, oh, cool, I'll reserve that. And then you have a more flexible time window. Like it just becomes available for a couple of days, and you have a couple of days to start a 5-hour window to watch it. That's how it works.
Yeah. I mean, the big one, at least for me last year in that case, was Summer of Soul, which premiered the first day. I was seeing like Flea and Coda that day, so I didn't catch it when it first premiered, but everyone was saying like, oh man, Summer of Soul is like an amazing documentary, you got to watch it. So the next day I scheduled it for a second screening and obviously got to see it. But yeah, that was a good find, at least in that case.
Totally. Yeah, it can really work out. Yeah, work to our favor when we do it correctly, for sure. So this year was a little bit different because Sundance wasn't originally going to be virtual only. They were going to have an in-person festival in addition to online. So you and I, we were always planning to do the virtual component. We weren't going to be going to Park City. And a lot of people were, though. A lot of people were going to be going to Park City, Utah. They were going to be going to the screenings. And they kind of built in this advantage to people who were going to the screenings because you would be able to like do the unlimited quote unquote unlimited premieres, and then also do your second screenings. It just depended on the festival, like, if you could get in, because when you're there in person, you can go, but you can kind of just go whenever, but you have to wait in line depending on like the level of like your press pass. Like you might be in a certain line, and then like other critics get like, or critics and industry people might get priority. And if they run out of seats, you don't get in. And it's a very stressful way to do Sundance. I'm not going to lie to you. The virtual component is way more democratic, you really have a lot more opportunities. Now that said, they canceled the in-person because of the Omicron variant, and cases were shooting up early January. And so they were like, okay, we're not going to do it. And so everybody had to do virtual. And what that meant was they still had the like built-in system for limiting the premieres, and they didn't go back on it. They were just sort of like, you have, I think it was 10 premieres that you can do. So fewer premieres than second screenings, and you have 15 second screenings. So all in all, you have the capacity to watch 25 films. And if you're like a film critic like you or me, that's 25 films we get to cover as press. And then if we want to watch anything else, we have to ask for screeners. Or we have to buy tickets. And I bought some tickets because you bought one. I bought like 3 or 4, and it gets expensive, for sure.
I was gonna say if they were cheaper tickets, and I understand why they're not, but they were, I would have indulged a little bit more. But because they were like 20 something bucks, I decided just to get a ticket for Nanny, which I missed during the actual festival run, which I probably would have done as the second screen if we had more of those available, but alas, obviously that wasn't the case. But
yeah, it was hard. We had to draw the line in a lot of cases, and that is one thing I want to get your take on, like the experience. This is your second year, and you've only done it virtual. I want to get your take on this because for me, I feel like we're kind of like this year we kind of lost like something that I really like about Sundance, which is that, like I said before, that sense of discovery, that like freedom and flexibility to like watch a movie just because like it happens to be on, and you don't know if it's going to be good. You don't know anything about it. And I was alluding to this as well. We both had to prioritize all of these films that were the buzzy films because we had to see those, because those are the ones that like with casts we recognize, with directors we recognize. But most of the time, like I'm noticing with Sundance, those are almost never my favorite films of the festival. My favorites tend to be the ones I didn't see coming. And I unfortunately, like that wasn't the case this year, because I think we had to overlook a lot of those kinds of films in order to do this. Now, we did have like second chances and third chances and fourth chances with those tickets. But yeah, I'm curious, what did you think? Because this is only your second year. So how do you think it compares?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to complain because I had a good experience with Sundance. I didn't have any technical issues ultimately, and I got to see a lot of films I wanted to see, through the press pass and for free. So I'm definitely thankful for what I got. But I was wondering, like you mentioned, when the festival became all virtual, if they're going to kind of tinker and make it so similar to last year, where we would have a little bit more wiggle room to see more films, kind of allow ourselves to have more opportunities to, kind of find those discoveries that we did last year, or have the, wiggle room to kind of see things that we might have been like, I'm kind of curious about that film, but I don't know if it's going to be any good. See it anyway and find out that, it's very good or amazing or something. And like you said, this year we had to basically prioritize the films that seemed the most in line with our interests, not always knowing whether or not they'd be any good, but just like, well, if I don't get to see this, I'm going to kick myself because, I really like this filmmaker, I really like this actor, I really like so-and-so with this. So, I mean, a lot of films like Watcher, like I don't think I would have prioritized that in a festival like last year, which, didn't get awful reviews or anything. But, when I'm making my schedule for this year, I'm like, oh, Micah Moroza movie. It's a new kind of thriller movie. Is this the next It Follows? So I gotta, make sure I get that one on my list. Or 892. This is the last Michael K. Williams movie. I don't want to miss that, and it has John Boyega in it too. I really want to see this. And as the festival goes on, none of those movies are awful. I think those are fine. But when it's all said and done, I'm like, would I prefer to have seen those movies over Descendant?
Descendant,
yeah, Descendant, or like Aftershock, or Nanny, which I obviously got to see later. But if I could have had the chance, maybe I would have prioritized that one if I had kind of seen where the tide had went with the festival, like I could last year. And I mean, I got to see a lot of films I liked. I mean, we'll talk about those in a little bit, but I feel like I didn't have the chance to see something like this year's All Light Everywhere, which I really loved last year and obviously was in my top 10. And that was the type of film that obviously going into the festival, I didn't have any expectations for. It was like really dying to see. But when I heard it was so good and I went to see it for myself, I got that discovery that you're talking about. So I do. There's a feeling that like I kind of missed something this year because I wasn't as able to find those kind of little films that really spoke to me or that seemed off the beating path that in a traditional film festival setting I could find. But at the same time, I did find a lot of films I liked, and I do think I enjoyed or at least appreciated more movies than not this year for my 20, 30 something films. So I'm definitely thankful overall, but at the same time, I do feel like compared to last year, I didn't get as many films I outright loved coming out of this year's Sundance.
Yeah, I mean, I have to echo, that sort of feeling of being like, it's so cool that we get to do this. It's so cool that we get to watch as many of these films as we get to watch for free as press. I mean, obviously free in the sense that we are writing reviews, we're working, but just the sense that we have that access, especially because a lot of people don't have that same access. And that's obviously something to be aware of. And that said, I mean, it is one of those things where I'm just like, I can't believe we get to do this. This is such a fun experience. This is something that I think I always look forward to now. This is my fourth Sundance. And every year I just feel like I'm absorbing more and more, rich filmmaking, more and more like filmographies and directors, new and old, who I either didn't know about before, I didn't know enough about, and it's just such an important time of the year for me as somebody who like I'm always wanting to like, I love the process. Like I love watching all these films back to back, just hardcore binging all these movies. It's hard because we just did that in December to sort of finish our year-end lists, but we love what we do. So I think that it all works out. In terms of this year versus last year, I definitely think very similar to you. This is one of those years where it's weird because I didn't dislike that many films. I think last year I disliked way more films than I did this year. I don't know if it's because, and I think I saw about the same amount that I did last year. It's like margin of error is like 1 or 2, but which is kind of interesting, and I think it's a lot of it is because I was way more active about screeners because I knew that I had a limit and because I watched more awards winners with tickets and all that. But that said, I'm looking at like everything I saw, and like there are a few films where I'm just like, yeah, that was not for me. I really wasn't clicking with that movie. But there weren't a lot of movies where I felt like I was wasting my time, or I felt like, I could have watched this instead. Kind of similar to you is like I did get to see like everything I wanted to watch the most, which is great. And not something you can say for every festival. That can be really hard to do actually for other film festivals. And so I'm pretty happy with how things turned out. Obviously, there are a few, films left over that I'm still excited to see at some point that I hope I can. But I guess the only thing is that, there's no one for the road this year for me. There's no Crypto Zoo. There's no Summer of Soul. Just like more of like a transcendent kind of film for me where I'm just like, man, there are a couple of films I really, really like, maybe even love, and they're up there. But yeah, I'd say that like there are 2 or 3 films from last year that I like more than all the films I saw this year. So it's kind of interesting, but I did like how this year went in the sense that like I liked most of these movies and I got a lot out of them, across the board. I feel like the sum totality of like all of these films is probably better than last year for me. Like last year, there were some films I saw where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is not for me. There's like this year, we like I think like across genres, and Sundance isn't known for having a lot of genres outside of horror. That was actually another Sundance film we didn't get to. We talked about documentaries and the dramedies and all that, but horror is another, like the midnight selection for Sundance is a big thing. You get a lot of really great horror films from this festival, and last year I thought that was something that was pretty lacking for me. I didn't think that it was very strong. The movies like Censor, Broadcast Interruption, and Knock Knock, and like I didn't really click with any of those movies. Whereas this year there were a few that I was like really into. Resurrection, is one that wasn't my favorite, but I thought was pretty interesting and, not a straightforward horror film.
Yeah.
Elevated horror, perhaps.
Yeah, good movie.
Yeah, really, there were some good horror ones here. Now, and I know you saw Speak of Evil, or Speak
No Evil.
Speak No Evil. Yes. Which, yeah, I know a bunch of people were in it. I didn't see Speak No Evil, but yeah.
It's a good movie.
Probably my favorite of them was probably Fresh. I really enjoyed Fresh. It kind of stuck with me.
Weirdly, I mean, like, I feel like Fresh is the type of movie where all the components of it I liked. I was pretty enthusiastic when I wrote my review. You can read it on cinemaholics.com. I enjoyed the experience of watching it. I think I would prefer not seeing it at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, but that's neither here nor there. Okay. But yeah, I mean, like, it didn't stick with me in the way that's like, oh wow, like that was like an amazing experience. But it's not like the type of film where it's like, I think it's technically improficient or anything. I don't think it's quite as deep as it could have been. It felt like more of like a flash in a pan than like oh wow, like, really deep metaphor for what it's trying to say. But I enjoyed it, and I definitely, I'm favorable on it. And I think we'll talk about it more probably when it comes out, because it's going to be on Hulu in a month or so. But I feel like that's the type of movie. It's like right in the middle for me, where it's like, I enjoyed it. It's technically proficient. It's entertaining. I think people are going to enjoy it when it comes out. But, like I said, flash in the pan, sort of like enjoying the moment. It kind of evaporates after that.
There is actually one other movie on that note, that it's not as like straightforward in terms of the horror of it, but Nanny, like, which you already kind of name dropped. Nanny kind of hit me pretty hard. I wouldn't say that Nanny was one of my favorites, but yeah, that's a film about like a young woman from Senegal who is like becomes a nanny in New York. I think it's New York. And, she starts to have like these premonitions built on like her guilt of leaving her son behind in Senegal while she's like caring for this other kid. And yeah, some of the imagery in that film is like really like fear inducing, and there's a lot of like really good, like really rich stuff there. So Nanny was quite good. Now, all that said, we've kind of dipped our toes into the films so far. Let's kind of cover our tracks here. What did we see numbers wise? So at this point, and you and I still have a couple more films we might squeeze in over the course of the next few days, but at this point we're recording this, we each saw the same amount of films unintentionally. It just kind of worked out this way. But yeah, we each saw 33 movies. Right? Well,
semi-intentionally, I guess I'll say, because
were you competing?
No. It wasn't in the sense that
movie.
Like,
I gotta.
No, what happened was we were going to record earlier, and then you're like, I'm going to watch Exiles. So I was like, what? I'll also watch a movie, because I'm just sitting around not doing anything, because I thought we were recording.
But yeah, if neither of us had done that, then we would have been the same, right? So
I guess so. Yeah.
I did squeeze in Exiles right before, because I was like, the Exiles was one that I was kind of thinking like, I want to see it, but I don't want to see it so much. But I was like, okay,
where'd you land on the Exiles? Because I watched it yesterday.
I was kind of disappointed by it, actually.
I thought it was
good enough, but it was like, it was one of those things where I thought the subject of the documentary was way more interesting than the documentary, and it just kind of dovetails into being a different documentary that I think is also interesting, but I don't think it's like perfectly justified in how they executed it. I think it was a good idea, like when they were doing it, they were like, hey, this is where the real story is. It just didn't work out for some weird reason, even though I think the filmmakers are quite competent from all appearances. So yeah, I think the issue is that like she is like an idol to the filmmakers, and that comes through, and it's a little bit too like, she's the best, isn't she? And I'm just like, yeah, she's a great director, but I want to see a documentary, please.
Right. I mean, that's what I kind of wondered about it too, and I wondered if that was also why it won the main prize, because like the first half of the movie, or not the first half, the first like 10 minutes of the movie are like literally talking about Sundance and talking about her and being like, man, she's awesome. Like, and the movie, it makes a good case for her, like she's really cool.
I think it would have been a better short documentary, honestly, documentary short, but who knows? But
yeah, I mean, it did kind of feel like it was like two documentaries at once. It's like a movie about her, and it's a movie about the topic that she's been trying to make a movie about for however many years.
Right. And it's like, like make that documentary by all means, but you can't do it like with this sort of half attempt. That's how it came off, at least to me, which is sad because I do think that the filmmakers did a lot of work, and I think that they tried really hard and they're quite talented. So it's nothing to say of their skill level. I just think that it's a hard topic to wield the way that they do. So that said, that's, you know, a little bit of a tangent. Now, between the two of us, we each saw 33 movies. I saw 33. You saw 33. A lot of common films between us, though. We saw a lot of the same films. There were, I want to say, 11 or 12 films that are outliers. So movies that I saw that you didn't, or films that you saw that I didn't. Those films include, I'll just run them down, Aftershock, which I saw, Girl Picture, The American Dream and Other Fairy Tales, which was mentioned before, God's Country, Descendant, Lucy and Desi, Brainwash, Sex, Camera, Power, Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, Downfall, The Case Against Boeing, We Need to Talk About Cosby, and The Princess. And then for you, Will, I have here, I think this is right, you saw Nothing Compares, which I haven't seen, Sharp Stick, the Lena Dunham Thing, Second Chance, Living, Speak No Evil, which we mentioned, Palm Trees and Power Lines, The Mission, The Cow Who Sang a Song Into the Future, great title, Klondike, To the End, and Neptune Frost. Now, I kind of want to, before we like dig into stuff, of the ones that I mentioned, the ones that I've seen, which one do you want to see the most?
Based on your enthusiasm for it and the fact that I almost had a chance to see it and then timing didn't allow me to see it, I think it would have to be Descendant.
Yeah.
Or is it? Yeah, Descendant.
That's the one I would recommend to you first.
Yeah.
Like Descendant and Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, and Aftershock are like the three.
Yeah, those are three of the big ones for me that was like, I wanted to see them. I contemplated seeing them, obviously. Didn't work out for various reasons. Because I imagine Good Luck to You, Leo Grande is really up my alley. It just wasn't, when I read the synopsis for it, I was like, yeah, that doesn't, I don't know. Seems like it's going to be kind of dumb, but yeah, obviously it got great reviews. So I was like, I should have, listened to my head instead of my gut on that one. But,
it's not amazing, but it's just, so it's Emma Thompson. I forget the actor's name, but he's more of a newcomer. I don't know how many things he's been in, but it's a bottle episode. It's My Dinner with Andre, but My Dinner with Grande. And I just think it's a very Sundance movie. I'll put it that way. And it's really well done, really well written, really good dialogue. It's about sexual repression. It's about a lot of things that I think are very interesting. It's not my favorite of the fest, but it's one of those movies where, of the ones that I did see, I'm like, I feel like that one would probably click with you more than the others.
Sure.
Because I think, some of these are a little bit more like the documentaries are, like, I think you'll get something out of them, but I don't think that they'll rock your socks, Like, I think Girl Pictures and God's Country are also kind of up there as movies you might find interesting.
Oh, yeah. And then also one I was really close to seeing was Happening, which I think got the Golden Lion from Venice.
Yeah.
Came to the festival, not as a premiere, but like as a second showing.
A spotlight feature. I really wanted to see Happening. Yeah, it just didn't quite work out. I asked for a screener and they nothing.
Same here, yeah. And I was going to use that as my last second screening, but I missed like the timing. I thought it was gonna expire the day after, then the day actually expired. So I ended up doing Something in the Dirt instead, which I don't begrudge because I actually like that movie a good bit.
I like that one, but I like The Endless more, and I think that Something in the Dirt, I really like those guys, but that movie was just a little bit much. And by the end of it, I was like, I'm glad this is over. I really got sick of it after a while.
See, I do think I appreciate it more in retrospect than completely while I was watching it, but I just admire the real tenacity of it. And I do think it is a pretty entertaining, funny movie in its own right. But,
it is funny. And it's funny in a way that I wasn't expecting. Like, it's dry humor, but then every once in a while it becomes like really like a different kind of humor that I liked. So yeah.
But also, like, I know enough of those like kind of conspiracy nut people that it's the idea of like poking fun at them enough to where it's not like ballooned too far from the strain of believability, but like enough so that it's like outlandish and goofy. I thought it was a balance that they really pulled off quite well. And also the fact that they, so far as I can tell, they're not actors, right? Like the directors, like when they star in the films, they're not traditionally actors before this movie.
Well, I think they were both in The Endless. They look kind of different now, but
To be clear, I have not seen the previous films.
The Endless is one of those movies I can't believe I saw in a movie theater. It's that indie, but they clearly have like a mode that they're of like interest, which that film is also about, like rituals and conspiracy theories and cults, like clearly like this is like an evolution from that film. The Endless though was a more straightforward narrative, whereas this is like kind of what you're alluding to. It's a semi-satire, it's really like poking fun at this sort of thing. It's poking fun at stuff that they've done and kind of relished in already. So I appreciate it on that level, but I think like as a film, there is a strikingly small group of people I would recommend it to, because I just don't think most people will get it. I don't think a lot of people will like it.
I don't know if I would agree with that, but I can see why you feel that way. For me, I feel like it's in that kind of same boat as Under the Silver Lake. I don't think it's quite as good.
Yeah, I know. Oh, that's exactly it. Because I know some people who like Under the Silver Lake, exactly their jam, but most people no. And like, who you are in that sense.
I don't know. I feel like Under a Silver Lake got a pretty good response, though. Like, maybe it's because the release
it got a louder response from a certain type of person, though, right? I feel like most people who see it are just like, the heck. But then the people who do appreciate it are just like, man, this is good.
I guess so. I mean, I think maybe that had to do with the release being botched so badly. I feel like if that got maybe a traditional wide release, the response would be more all over the place, but I think the people who wanted to see it saw it out and liked it, so maybe it just seemed like more people liked it than I'm giving it credit.
I mean, to this day, the episode of Cinemaholics where you talked about it with, I think, was it Matt or Corey? I don't remember.
Corey Woodruff, yeah.
Was it Corey? Like that episode, I think like people have mentioned it, of just like when people are looking for conversations about the film. I've seen, like when I'm doing my whole, like, are people talking about us? Like I've seen on Reddit, I've seen on Twitter, like, oh, Cinemaholics did an episode of Under the Silver Lake. Check it out.
I like that. I mean, that's good to hear, because I thought that was a pretty good conversation between the two of us.
I thought it was okay. It could have used more Matt Serafini.
That's true. I mean, any episode of Cinemaholics could use more Matt Serafini, to be honest. But anyway, what were we talking about before?
Well, I think the next thing, because the movies that I said that you wanted to see, for sure, Descendant, Aftershock, both documentaries. Good luck to you, Leo Grande. Of the films that you saw, I'm really curious about The Mission, and I really want to see it. I'll probably see Speak No Evil when it comes out. I'm not like chomping at the bit. I'm only interested in seeing Sharpstick because of your reaction to it. The new Lena Dunham film.
I have so much to say about that movie, and I don't know when I'm going to ever get around to saying it, but I like the movie. I almost against my better judgment, but I will say for The Mission, I think you'll like it. I don't want to set your expectations too high, because I don't think it fully comes together well enough as it should, and I think I'm
not expecting it to be great. I'm just kind of like really interested in it as a documentary, so like I just kind of want to experience it.
I mean, that's the type of documentary I really enjoy getting out of Sundance, where it's like, personally speaking, I don't have a lot of experience with the Mormon religion or, like,
I don't have like direct experience, but I know a lot of people who come from that walk of life, and I've talked to a lot of people who've gone through it. And so I'm always interested in those kinds of documentaries that are getting into like that sort of like, hey, this is a thing that is like happening in America that doesn't get talked about a lot. And it particularly in like Utah. Right. Like it's kind of, interesting that like we weren't able to see this in Salt Lake, because when you go to Salt Lake City and Park City, like not everybody's Mormon, but it's the Mormon capital of the world. So,
which is probably one of the bigger reasons why it got selected for the festival. Not to say that the merits of the movie aren't there, but I'm sure that played a big part in it being accepted into the festival this year. But I have complicated
feelings about all that. I don't want to disparage any Mormon listeners or anything like that.
No, I'm not. I'm not doing that.
I hope it didn't come across that way at all.
No, I mean, that's not what I intended either. I want to make it clear that I think any film festival, they have, outside of like what they want to show, they have other factors at play. And that's not so much because of the people involved, but rather it's like if you have 100 plus something movies that you want to show, you can only show 50 of them. And you're like, okay, like what is our audience most likely to want to see at our festival? Something like that, where there is a key audience locally that wants to see the movie. It makes sense that they would pick that film. Like that's logic.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just bring it up just because like there are a lot of Mormons in America, and there are a lot of Mormons all over the world. And I just feel like Mormonism is just one of those things that people just are not comfortable like talking about or talking to like Mormon people. Like it's just one of those things that I want more like communication. You know what I mean? Right. And I understand like this documentary doesn't do that necessarily, but I haven't seen it.
Well, no. Well, you say that, but like I feel like the movie does take good steps as far as like allowing me to understand the Mormon religion more.
Oh, that's
like
good to hear. Okay.
I mean, that's what I really enjoyed about it, I think. And that's why I feel like I'm more supportive of the film than some other people I've talked to or read, as far as like, it seems like the response has been somewhat muted. And I feel like I can understand why, because I don't think the documentary fully comes together in a concrete way. But I feel like the cinema verte style that it favors is really effective as far as like getting us a naturalistic look at this religion in a way that I feel like a lot of movies and media haven't, because they just don't really want to.
Yeah, I think that's they don't want to like, step on toes and
or whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter what the reasons are. I just feel like we haven't got a lot of media that explores this religion effectively, and I think that's something I find really commendable about the movie. And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to support it. And I wrote a review, and it'll probably come up this week, but that's something I get into there. But
did you see the Book of Mormon, the play?
No, I want to. It's just that, I've heard it's great. Tickets have always been like $200 something, and it just I'm hoping it someday is cheaper. It's like Hamilton,
Clear. I mean, it's obviously not like an indicative, sort of like thing, but yeah, it just that is obviously like the polar like extreme, right? Of Mormon understanding in America, or like understanding of that whole thing.
Well, I mean, I've seen the South Park episode where they talk about Mormons, and like they do like that dum that whole thing, and I've seen that, and I think that's kind of painted a perception of Mormonism for better or for worse with American culture significantly. So,
Okay. Now, all that said, the one that I want to see probably the most is Palm Trees and Power Lines. I don't know really much of anything about it. And I do know that you saw it. I know a bunch of people saw it and liked it. I think it won at least one award. I forget which one. The
director award, I believe.
The director?
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, or one of the director awards. Yeah.
Something along those lines. But yeah, I do want to see Palm Trees and Power Lines. It was one that I probably would have seen instead of The Exiles, but the tickets were sold out. So, but a lot of these movies we're talking about too, we're going to be like, we're not going to talk about every film here because we now got, let's get into our favorites. But we're going to be mentioning these films off and on over the next year. That's the beauty of Sundance. But I think we should just get into it then. Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad you brought up Palm Trees and Power Lines, because that is, I think, one of my favorites of the festival.
Oh, is it? So maybe we can start with that. Yeah, sure. Let's talk about no particular order. What are your favorite films? I guess we can start with that one if you want.
I mean, that's not my top, that's not my number one film, to be clear, but it is, I would say, probably top 5 or close to it. I really thought that it's a hard watch. I mean, I don't want to I want to get that out of the way immediately. It's a very harrowing film, given the subject matter. It's basically, I've heard it described as like the serious version of Red Rocket from the female perspective, and I think that's not entirely what it is.
Was Red Rocket not serious? I guess not.
No, but I mean, like, if you just want to do like a baseline based on a recent thing example, that's probably sensible as far as like how to describe it, but. The film itself is just, I definitely understand why it won the Best Director award, because the way the plot plays out, it doesn't do anything that I think people want to expect, but it's all about like the little nuances of it and the way that it just so effectively showcases all of the like red flags that go into this type of relationship, this very icky sort of relationship. But it's done in the way that you also understand the main character's perception, and you get a kind of complicated look at her, because it avoids like oversimplifying her or making her overly like innocent or whatever that people might expect from something like this. But at the same time, like, obviously she is being victimized, and she obviously is in a very predatory relationship, and it's done in a very sort of naturalistic and, as I said before, harrowing way, and the performances really do a lot to command that as well. So I mean, I don't think it's like an amazing movie or something that's like, I don't think it's going to be in my top 10 for the end of the year or anything like that, but it's one I'm sure I'm going to be thinking about a lot as the year progresses. I don't know who's going to pick it up for release or anything like that. I could see like A24 or somebody picking that up, but it's going to be a hard sell, and I can imagine that's probably why it hasn't been picked up for distribution yet. despite the good reviews and the awards that it's gotten so far. But yeah, I mean, it's one that it really stuck with me, and I feel like ending it, or it was like my last official Sundance film, and it was a good and bad note to end on in all the ways that you would expect. So yeah, that's Palm Trees and Power Lines.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, and I didn't even know about the Red Rocket comparison, so I guess that's kind of fitting, considering. Yeah, I kind of just perused it a little bit here on Letterboxd, and I think I see the person who said, yeah, it is a more serious Red Rocket, but they told they gave it 2 stars, and so who knows? Who knows what's up with that? Brian Tallarico from Roger Ebert, though, 3.5 stars, and one of my favorite critics, Raphael Sales Rose, she gave it 3.5 as well. So, Will, clearly some people are clicking with it, but yeah, that's it. Like, there are only like a few people that I'm friends with on Letterboxd who saw it, so it's clearly not sparking quite yet. When I first saw the name of the movie, I was like, oh, Sugar Cult. Is this a documentary about that album? It is not. Did you ever listen? Do you know what I'm talking about? You know that song, like, she's the blade and I'm just paper. You don't know that one?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's been a long time since I've heard that song. But
we were just kids,
Yeah, I know. I mean, I didn't make that connection when I was watching the film, I'll be perfectly honest. But I can see why you made that comparison.
I mean, it was hard for me not to. Okay. Okay, I'll get into one that I liked quite a bit. We already mentioned it. Let's talk about Descendant. Descendant is, I don't know if it might be my favorite of the whole festival, and I might just be starting with that, but this is one that I recommend that you see the most, just because as a documentary, it is a little bit more, I think, of the style that I think you tend to favor. Like, when I think about the documentaries that you've responded to most favorably, I think of like City Hall. I think about, what was that one about the fire in, I want to say, Romania. It was like in that club, and it was about like the sports journalist
Collective.
uncovered it. Huh?
Collective.
That was one. That was a good one.
Yeah, that was kind also of Sundance premiere.
Oh yeah, you're right. So yeah, like this movie's like in that zone. Obviously, it's its own thing too. It's a documentary about this group of descendants of the last American slave ship that came to the States, like stole Africans from Africa and brought them over here to Mobile, Alabama. And for years and years and years, over 100 years, obviously, there has been this sort of like folk tale, or not folk tale, because I just mean sort of like a local, like a regional, like oral history of what happened that they couldn't be more like forthcoming about, just because, like, 50 years ago, if you talked about this, they mentioned the documentary, like, you'd get lynched because this slave ship was illegal. The slave ship happened after the United States banned that, right? But there were these people, like, just real sick human beings who, I think it came down to like a bet of like, oh, I bet you can't do that. You can't like sneak a slave ship over here and like bring a bunch of Africans over here to be owned, quote unquote owned, and then they burn the ship so there's no evidence. And so this documentary kind of starts in that place of like, okay, well, where's the ship? And like, it's sort of like a local curiosity. But as the documentary progresses, like more and more you see like the descendants themselves, like they don't care about the ship. They care about the things that have really like, inhibited like the legacies that they're clinging to, their way of life, like their town, like they had this, African town, and like that is what they called it, and how these like factories and stuff have like propped up, they've ruined their communities, and just like systematic oppression over the decades, over the centuries, has just like brought them down and down and down. But like at the same time, they're like such a strong people, they're such a strong like community of people who are like bonded together by this connection that they have to this terrible human event that like they share trauma for. It's a powerful documentary. It's one of those things where it's just like, I'm so curious about how they even got into it. I know there's a Q&A. I haven't seen it yet, but Margaret Brown's the director. She did Be Here to Love Me, a film about Townes Van Zandt, which I don't remember how long. It was like like a decade ago or something like that. But yeah, clearly a passion project, something that like took a long time to make and like certainly required a lot of research and a lot of like fact checking. And you just really like, you invest so deeply and so instantly with the subjects of this documentary. One of the things about the documentary too that like is most striking is that, especially when it comes to the ship, you see a lot of how to these people, the descendants, it's a pain point, and they're sort of like talking about it and they're just like, yeah, this happened. And then you have like this other group of people, white people of this area who like treat it like a historical curiosity. They treat it like this sort of quirk of history. I was like, wow, this is what we think the ship looked like. And then you see the descendants there and they're just like, yeah, I guess that's what the ship looked like. And you just see it on their faces and they're just like, yeah, you don't take this seriously. You know what I mean? It's like these people who like, there are so many like self-corrections, and there are other, white people who are just like, hey, yeah, I don't think this is something we celebrate. I wouldn't use that choice of word. And like, as you're watching and you're like, yeah, that's pretty messed up. So it's one of those movies that I think that one of those documentaries that I think is like really powerful, not for what it's educating, but really like the emotional undercurrent of it, and how much history is probably lost to us. This is one of those cases where it was preserved, but not easily. And there are probably so many stories out there that like have just been covered up, buried. I know The Exiles was kind of about that too, right? But like beyond that, like this happens all throughout human history, and there's so much we don't know. So yeah, I think Descendant is a must see. So I was really into it.
Yeah, and then did you mention Netflix picked that one up?
Oh no, I didn't mention that. So yeah, it's going to be on Netflix. I don't know when it's supposed to come out. Actually, I know they acquired it, but yeah, eventually it'll be on Netflix, and a lot of people will have a chance to see it, which I'm very happy about.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. If I had planned things better, I would have seen it and probably shared your praises. But unfortunately, have not seen the film as of now, so I cannot at the moment say anything about it.
No worries. It did win. It won a special jury award, which I did not mention. It won the U.S. Documentary Special Jury Award for Creative Vision, and I think, well deserved. That went to the director and the producers. All right. Well, what else you got?
So if I had to pick a personal favorite of the ones I've seen, I haven't made a list or anything yet. I'll probably make that later in the week. Just for my own personal sake. But if I were to pick a favorite at the moment, I think it would have to be After Gang, which is an A24 film, which I know is supposed to come out
real good.
Sometime later this year. I don't know if they actually have a release date for it yet as of now.
I'll look it up.
I imagine it's probably going to come out in the spring or the summer. I'm guessing they're going to...
Yeah, I could see either. Yeah, because they probably want to get it in before award season, right? Because it already premiered at Cannes last year.
If I were a betting man, I feel like they'd probably want to release it around the same time they released Ex Machina back in like 2014 or 2015.
I think it would either, to what you're saying, would either be the spring or it could be A24's summer release. They tend to release something either late July or August. I doubt it would be the July one, though. I forget what else A24 has in the docket because this doesn't seem like that kind of movie.
Well, July was the release date for Green Knight, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
but this is definitely not that kind of film, right? Because that Green Knight was more genre.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
This is genre too, but yeah.
So sorry to interrupt, but we actually just found out way after we recorded this, the morning after, that there is now an official release date for After Yang. Obviously, that news hadn't broken yet when we recorded this, so I just wanted to add that here after the fact, so you are aware. After Yang, it is coming out March 4th, 2022 in theaters as of right now, and so that's why in this next part, you got to keep that in mind because we didn't know that at the time, and so obviously we're speculating about something that we now know, which again, March 4th, 2022. Give it up to Will because he guessed accurately that it would be the spring, even though I thought that would be kind of weird because they have 2 other films coming out in March. But what are you going to do? Anyway, back to the show.
Well, it's like that sci-fi where it's like in the service of the character and the mood and the tone of the film, which is similar to Ex Machina. Not saying that this movie is quite the same tonally as Ex Machina, but that's probably the quickest comparison because it is that sort of mature, kind of grounded sort of sci-fi where obviously it's like this futuristic world and these kind of far out concepts, but the story itself is obviously favoring a sort of a muted characteristic approach, a very humanistic approach, which is a little ironic given that the movie itself is about Colin Farrell trying to make peace with his kid robot no longer functioning and having to kind of carry the burden of not only holding the grief for that, but also trying to process how to relay that information to his own young daughter that he adopted, and also how he's going to really kind of honor the legacy of Yang, who is the robot in question, because there is like this museum that is trying to basically acquire him for preservation's sake, because he has basically like 100 years of memories, information stored in his bank. And it's like, can we basically take this and use this as a way of, educating, future, the future of humanity as far as like what life was like, but also it's just like, would that cheapen Yang's existence, because like he did have feelings, he did have connections to people later on, and it's just a very thoughtful, meditative film, but it has so many grace notes and so many moments of purity and warmth and heart, and it's just it's a really gratifying film in that sense. Like it's the type of film that I was liking it from the get-go, but by the end of it I found myself more moved than I think I really anticipated. And I joked with you that it is basically A24's Bicentennial Man, which I use in a flippant sense, but I also kind of feel like it is like, what if Bicentennial Man was good? You know what I mean? Like it's like, what if like that are you coming to bat for Bicentennial Man?
No, but I do think it's
directed by Chris Columbus, the father of Violet Columbus, who directed The Exiles.
It's just a pretty harsh, but you know what? I'm not stopping you.
Right. I mean, I don't like, if I were to compare this film to some of the movies I feel like were in my top 5 from the last Sundance, I don't know if it would have cracked them, but at the same time, I just feel like it's also the type of film that the more I sit with it, the more I kind of stew with the film, I will probably grow to like it even more. And I should have mentioned earlier that this is, I don't quite know how to pronounce his name, but it's the director of Columbus. Coconata, yeah. His follow-up to Columbus, which also premiered at Sundance back in 2017. I actually got the chance to watch that film for the first time last year. They showed it as part of the testing process. Like, so for the virtual festivals, they have a film that they show you basically to make sure your tech equipment is okay. Last year it was Columbus, and then this year it was the incredibly true story of two women in love. I think I'm getting that title correct. Which I don't know if you got a chance to see. That was actually a pretty good film.
No.
It's good, yeah. Came out in the 90s, a very sweet film. I don't think I would have had a chance to see it if it weren't for those circumstances.
Sounds interesting. But I mean, Columbus.
Yeah,
I mean, we've talked about this. Columbus, I think, is one of the best films made in the 2010s. Like, I think it's one of the top 10.
Yeah, I actually think this one I liked a little bit more than Columbus, but I like Columbus a lot too, to be clear. But I just think he's getting better as a filmmaker, and I'm really excited to see where he goes. I hope he keeps collaborating with A24. Because it seemed like they gave him a pretty sizable budget for this, but it doesn't feel like it's like an expensive movie at the same time, but it feels like the perfect amount of budget for this film. And you can see the money on screen, but it doesn't feel like it's like, it doesn't disservice what the film is saying ultimately. And also I should mention, you get a moment here where Colin Farrell does a beautifully and surprisingly accurate impression of Werner Herzog that is worth the price of admission alone, but the movie itself is already pretty tremendous as it is. So that's definitely been, I think, the highlight of the festival for me is After Yang.
I'm already itching to see After Yang again because I think I'm still processing it. I don't know what it was about this movie, but like I had a reaction to it I don't think I ever have to like movies, which is I don't know genuinely what I think of it. Like I have such a weird emotion with it that is like unfamiliar. And like I said before, I think Columbus, I could watch that movie a million times. I just think that it's so profoundly good. And I think this one is too, but I'm just having so much trouble with it. A lot of the things that like stick in my craw with it, I don't know if it's in a bad way or a good way, but like Jodie Turner-Smith is in this movie, and Jodie Turner-Smith I've interviewed before, like really cool person. and somebody who, like, as I was watching, I was like, I feel like this performance, there's something behind this that I just feel like there's stuff in this movie that I'm missing that I want to, like, totally fully understand. And I'm really into it. I really love the aesthetic of it, the sci-fi world building of it. I love the story and the performances. I think the writing is really good. Like, there were times when I was pausing and I was like writing down the dialogue because I was just like, this is poetry, man. But the thing about the movie that I think throws me off, and I don't understand how I feel about it, is Haley Lu Richardson. Because as the listeners who listen to this show know, Haley Lu Richardson, one of my favorite actors. I think like one of my favorite young actors. She's so fantastic in everything I've ever seen her in, even in crappy movies. Like 5 Feet Apart, she single-handedly takes that film and turns it from like a 4 into a 6.5. So
that's a little generous, but I can admire your enthusiasm, I think. Yeah.
Sure. No, I think Haley Richardson, a wonderful actor, wonderful young actor. And what she's able to do with facial expression and blocking, and how she, like, takes dialogue that, like, anybody else might, like, infuse almost no emotion into, she infuses emotion into without even trying, is really interesting to me. And I really like the young performance in here too, from, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but Malia Emma Chandrawajija. I don't know how to say that correctly, but she plays, like, the young girl in this. And, like, typically when you see, like, kids in these kinds of movies, you're just like, oh, you know, like, they're just kind of bratty. But she's so believable. Like, she's so, like, authentic and real, and, like, all this stuff comes together for me. But there is just something about After Yang that just doesn't sit with me yet. And I just feel like I think I need to see it again. That said, I did some fact checking. I looked into A24's slate, Will, and this is what I'm seeing. So I think we both know they have that one February film that's coming up, big film, called The Sky is Everywhere.
The Apple TV Plus film.
Yeah, it's an Apple original. It's going to be coming out in time for Valentine's Day, but this is the latest one from Josephine Decker. So a lot of attention on it. Jason Segel is in it, Grace Kaufman, a bunch of people that we like. Yeah,
I mean, well, speaking of Sundance, I mean, Madeline's Madeline and Shirley, both, I think, Sundance films, right? Shirley Sundance? I guess it was, huh? Yeah, it was. For some reason, I had, like, South by Southwest in my head for it, but no, that was 2020 Sundance, because I missed it at Sundance. I think I saw it later. And then X, the next Mia Goth and Jenna Ortega, Brittany Snow. I really want to see X. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's coming out in March. So, like, we literally have Skies Everywhere February. A month later, we get X. And then a week later after X, I'm seeing a release date for Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is really confusing to me. That's the new Michelle Yeoh film. The Daniels.
The Daniels made it. And I
Swiss
thought
Army Man? Yeah.
Yeah, the Swiss Army Man guys. I thought that was going to be coming out, like, early summer maybe, or, like, late summer. But no, that's March spring. 25th.
Yeah. That's why I'm thinking X, or not X. I'm thinking After Yang is probably going to be April, May, and then When You Finish Saving the World, it's probably going to be
because
June,
they also
July.
have. Well, okay, I have, like, a list here. The
yeah.
next thing is Marcel the Shell with Shoes On.
Yeah,
and I wonder if that's going to be the April.
I think that's, like, the August release.
Well, they don't have an official release date. So Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, and After Yang, and When You Finish Saving the World, another Sundance movie.
I think they're
all
June or
TBD.
July. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And we haven't talked about When You Finish Saving the World. That's the Jesse Eisenberg written and directed film.
Saw, right? We saw that film?
Yeah, I saw When You Finish Saving the World. I thought
I did too.
I liked it better than a lot of other people. I think a lot of people said, like, outright disliked this one. I thought it was solid. I liked it. I had issues with it, but I was kind of like, yeah, you know what? They passed the time. I like Julianne Moore and Finn Wolfhard in this.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I saw it, I was like, yeah. And then in the weeks or the days since, I'm kind of like, oh yeah. Like, it didn't really, like, stick with me much. Like, I enjoyed the time watching it. I liked seeing Jesse Eisenberg's impression of, like, early 2000s Noah Baumbach. Like, he's kind of channeling that Squid and the Whale energy. But I feel like it didn't really, like, steep deep into my skin. Like, I enjoyed the time. I think Eisenberg shows promise as a filmmaker, but it didn't make, like, a lasting impression for me, especially in a festival setting.
It makes choices that I respect quite a lot in terms of, like, making up. It makes up, like, dialogue quirks for Finn Wolfhard's character, Tara Lift all the way, And it does something kind of like with the idea of like live streaming and being sort of like an internet celebrity and how that can be so cringe when you like collide it with like the real world that I thought was interesting. It doesn't fully come together, but I do think, like you said, it kind of a solid debut. And I think people are being pretty harsh on it. I think possibly because people had higher expectations than I did, maybe. I don't know. But
I mean, I know some critics were really high on it. I know David Ehrlich was like really high on it. I think Robert Daniels was also really high on it.
I actually kind of forgot a couple of people actually liked it. The last time I was looking at Letterboxd, I saw a lot of 2s and 2.5s. But
I don't think it's that. I think it's your prototypical like 3 out of 5. Like it's solid. Yeah. I enjoyed it. Didn't really make a deep impact on me.
Yeah, and I'm sure like most people who see it will like not regret seeing it. You know, they'll be like, that was kind of cool. But yeah, all that said, I think that based on the order that they have this, I could see Marcel the Shell with Shoes On being like in April or May, probably April, and then After Yang being their summer thing, and then When You Finish Saving the World coming in after, like maybe in the fall. But possible? I don't know. I could be totally wrong. I wonder if they could be saving both of them for award season, which I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, weird question, but is Marcel the Shell, is it like a kid's film technically?
I don't know much about it. I mean, I know the YouTube video that it's based
that's
on.
what I mean. Yeah, but
it has a good cast, right? So like Jenny Slate and Rosa Salazar. So I don't know like what vibe it's going for, but that's why I think that it's more of like a summer thing. But at the same time, or like a late spring thing. At the same time, A24 does like to put stuff out in the summer that they have for awards, like your Zola's of the world and 8th Grade, and you know, like they tend to come out with that stuff in the summer. Last Black Man in San Francisco.
I'm wondering if Marcel the Shell has a wide audience appeal, not only for like A24 fans, but like families, if they're going to push that in the summer when kids are out of school and stuff.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
And like After Yang, they're going to push in like that early summer, late spring category, because it's not like a blockbuster, but it's kind of nice counter programming from whatever is going to be coming out.
But see, if you're going to do the counter programming thing, I don't think June or early July is the way to do it. I think it's April, early August.
Huh? I think in May then.
You think? I could see it May, but it would have to be like, I think early May.
But then that's why I'm thinking When You Finish Saving the World is August, because that's like people want to see
makes sense for that movie. Yeah.
Like August, September, like that Gloria Bell area where it's like, it's notable enough because of the stars involved and people will see it, but it's not like something that people are going to be rushing out to see. It's kind of just like, we want to beat the heat and see something. Let's see.
It's the kid from Stranger Things. Right. I know that. I want to see it.
That's my headspace. I could be totally wrong whenever they announce their category.
Finn Wolfhard. Yeah. He was in it. That came out in September. I want to see it. That's what's going to happen. So, you know what? A24, they know what they're doing, A24. I don't know if that's true. Sometimes they make decisions with their release dates that I don't understand, but that's why I am not a film executive.
What if they just release all of these in like December?
Yeah.
Like they just dump them all in December.
One after the other. Oh, yeah. I got to expect that they have some films that they're going to be announcing for like award season this coming year. That, you know, stuff that's going to be premiering at Cannes, stuff that's, you know, Berlin, all that.
Yeah. I mean, they got the Aronofsky joint coming up. The Whale. Is that
going to be this year though, or next year?
Yeah, I think it's this year. That seems like
this year. It's got to be like end of 2022.
Oh yeah, then I think they're going to save that for like Venice TIFF and then premiere it in like November or whatever. That's my guess.
Well, okay. So After Yang, we both really liked it. You liked it, I think, a little bit more than I did, but I don't even know. I could, by tomorrow, it could be one of my favorite films ever. I don't know, but okay, I'll say my next thing. Okay, I guess we can talk about Cha Cha Real Smooth, because I really, really like this movie a lot.
Now it's time to get funky.
It's time. You just love that, don't you? This won the Audience Award for U.S. Dramatic. And so this movie, I think just Cooper Raiff, I think he just has my number is all it is. I think he's making movies. He's like a male Sally Rooney in the sense that like he doesn't know I exist, but he's helping me out a lot.
Didn't we say that Joachim Trier or whatever the guy, worst person in the world, isn't that? Didn't we just designate him the male?
Oh yeah, Sally we did. You're right. Yeah, we got to be a little bit more. I have to be a little bit less. I'm like handing these awards out left and right. You know, it's just like you're Sally Rooney now. No, but and I think Worst Person in the World is a better film than this one. To be clear, But I really, really like Cha Cha Real Smooth. This is one of those movies. This is a crossover, like I was talking about in that video. This is a movie that like it has the trappings of an art house. It's got like craft, or at least like some craft, but it's really trying to hit some mainstream appeal. It's really trying to like click with a lot of people. It's kind of like an elevated. If we can have elevated horror, we can have elevated TV movies. How about that? And this is Cooper Raiff, who he stars in it, but he's the director. His last film was a movie we did talk about on Cinemaholics once upon a time. And the name of it is a swear. So I am going to say it. So if you have kids,
oh boy,
it's time to teach them a word.
Innocent, precious years. Yeah.
Yes. Shithouse is his first film. And I really like Shithouse is a film that I still think about it. I think that some of the quirks in that movie, it just works.
Yeah,
like I think the whole thing with the dog, I don't know. There's something about the way that Cooper Raiff screenplays that I resonate with. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I really wish I shared the enthusiasm you and a lot of people have for this. I think he's a super talented guy. I don't think I think that's pretty undeniable at this point. The dude is he like 24 right now? Like he's
early 20s. I don't think. I'll look it up. I think you're right that he's 24, but I could see maybe 25.
If he's not 24, he's like 23. I mean, the dude has 2 movies under his belt. He's like the American Xavier Dolan or whatever. Like he's just like just pumping these movies out at a really young age and making movies that, like you mentioned, have screenplays.
They're low budget movies, He's not
right.
So but, he's 23.
Very thoughtful, very earnest. Like I think he emulates a lot. He's young, so he emulates a lot of his idols, I think, in his filmmaking. But
sorry. He was 23 as of 2020 because this is an old thing. Right. He's 97, so he's 20. Okay. He's going to be 25 this year.
That's why.
So you were right. He's 24.
Yeah.
Unless he already turned 25, which is unlikely.
I don't know. I mean, whatever. He's 24, soon to be 25. Come on the show if it's wrong, Cooper, and we'll talk it out.
I want to be friends with Cooper Raiff.
Sure. When you become friends with John, you can correct us when you come on the show. But yeah, I mean, I think I can see why he hits the right notes for a lot of people. I think he makes pretty good movies. I think he puts a lot of himself into these movies. He's very sincere as a filmmaker and as an actor and just as a person. I think he just seems like a really heart in the sleeve sort of dude. I don't think he's made a movie yet where it's like hit me squarely in the feels in a way that's like truly transcendent in the way that it has for a lot of people. I think this movie gets closer for me than Shithouse, but I feel like I'm not quite there with him yet, but I can see why other people are. And I'm not trying to take that away for anybody. But this movie, it was pretty surreal for me, at least, because it had a lot of the things where it should have been like my ticket, should have been like a 10 out of 10. It's filmed in Pittsburgh. It's filmed in my hometown for the climax.
You were
of the movie,
recognizing like exact locations.
No, I mean, the climax of the movie is my community center parking lot. And I'm not talking like Pittsburgh's community center parking lot. I mean like my actual hometown where I grew up.
It's like a suburb of Pittsburgh, right?
Right.
So like I was looking for you in the movie. I was like, all right, where's Will Ash? And I don't
like legit. Like if you ever come to Pittsburgh, I can drive you to the spot and be like, that's where Cooper and
I just imagine you're like walking down the sidewalk unintentionally in the movie. Like maybe you have like a bunch of books from the library you just checked out,
Yeah. No, I mean, you joke, but like literally that location is 2 minutes away from my library.
So there you go.
Like not even joking. Not even joking. Like it's that close to where I live. And it features a primarily, not primarily, it does feature an autistic character, which is obviously something I really respond to and recognize in film and stuff like that. And I also tend to really like coming of age films from multi-hyphenate. So
yeah, you're perks of being a wallflower, graduate, but this movie does not have your heart.
Yeah. I mean, I like the movie. I think the second half is stronger than the first. I think, as you've probably mentioned already, I think it's a smarter movie than some people are giving it credit. Like, I think some people are seeing the multi-hyphenate, like the dude is acting, writing, directing, producing the film or whatever. They're like, oh, this is an ego trip. Like, this is a guy.
That's the superficial read. That's the sort of like, oh, I'm just going to not engage with this film whatsoever and bad faith, put a bunch of stuff on it that is there if you are barely paying attention. But I mean, there's way more going on.
Is some of that in the movie? I mean, sure. Like, I don't think anyone who is like acting, writing, directing their movies at 20 something doesn't have an ego on some level.
Sure.
But I think Cooper is very self-aware about his image and himself and what he wants to say as a filmmaker and what he wants to say with his characters in his films. And I think in this movie, like, it goes out of its way to kind of subvert that Sundance thing where it's like he wants to be the life of the party, but like anytime outside like the initial inciting incident where he tries to do it, he's like a mess up, you know, like he does a bad job basically. Like he doesn't read the room properly and all this stuff, and he's like trying to figure himself out in the process, and it's very deliberate stuff that I feel like I guess some people are just overlooking or choosing to overlook. I don't quite get it, but like I mean there's more to it than that, but I feel like that's the thing people keep bringing up where it's like, oh, like everyone wants to like be him and think he's so cool and he's like life of party stuff, and the movie goes out of its way to be like, no, that's not it at all. Right.
No, because I think so this movie is about a guy in his early 20s. He just got out of college and he's aimless. You know, he just moved back in with his parents, and he's working at like a fast food place. He's sharing a room with his stepbrother, and his stepbrother, who's still in like middle school, because he is now going to like bar mitzvahs with his brother, and like he gets like a gig like as a party starter, as somebody who like gets people to have fun. And that's the thing, is like that's pathetic. It's like the movie sets him up to be very pathetic. The first scene sort of establishes that he's very aware of the fact that he's willing to embarrass himself, you know, in order to express himself. And the movie is sort of about how he learns to not always do that, to sometimes have self-control and have restraint, of to not always put yourself at the center of everything. Like, it's literally what the movie is about. And like people are looking at it and they're just getting a totally different read, which is their right. But I do think that this movie does two things that are really important to me in terms of what I want from films, or I want from more films, which is give us really positive stories about masculinity. There just aren't enough films like this. And I talk about this so many times on Cinemaholics. I'm a broken record at this point, but if this is the first time you're listening, I think that the men, particularly in American men have a lot of problems. And a lot of it, we're victims of. A lot of it we perpetrate ourselves. And a lot of it comes from our culture. It comes from the movies that we watch and the things we tell each other. And I think that a positive instrument of change is for men to talk to each other, and for us to like make things for each other, and to like have like hearts to hearts with each other. And I think doing that through film is a beautiful thing. I think this is one of those movies. It's why I love it, because I would show this to my boys. And this is one of those movies that like just normalizes the lads. But no, it's a movie that like normalizes men being kind of honest about their emotions, and like not falling into like the traps of like, sometimes, you know what, as a guy, you fall hard for somebody you shouldn't fall for. It happens a lot. And this is one of those movies that kind of grapples with that. It doesn't do it perfectly, and I don't think it goes all the way, but I do think that it's a really good like introduction to sort of like processing heartbreak and disappointment in your early 20s and realizing that you're not all that, and that's okay. And like there's just so much of that in this movie, and I think guys need more stuff like this and less, like I love enjoying genre action, I love like revenge thrillers, but there are also the movies like this. There are movies like, Riders of Justice that just explore like, we're multitudes, we're guys. Like sometimes I get really annoyed when like it all gets boiled down to like just men are the worst. And it's like, you know what? We do a lot of crap, and we should be aware of that stuff. Men. But like, you know what? Men
not even once.
Men not even once. That was the theme of the festival, and I'm happy for it. Men need a humility check, and because we live in a system that favors us, like we're a very patriarchal system. And at the same time, I think that like men, we're complicated. we're emotionally complicated. Our masculinity is weird. We get mixed messages from everything. Movies are telling us something. TV is telling us another. Our friends are telling us all kinds of things. Society is saying we're the worst. And it's just like, how do you process that? And there's a lot of crap that men go through that, like, I'm not saying is like worse or, you know, anything. Like, I'm not comparing it to anybody else's plight, but it is a specific set of problems that we need to sort out. And we shouldn't be like always relying on other people to sort, like the other gender to sort it out for us. We should be like trying to take care of ourselves and each other in a communal sense. In the same way that I think I see positive female friendships, I see female communities, I see like this uplifting and this normalization of like women just being supportive of each other. And I want men to be that for each other too. Obviously, men can support women, women can support men. That's also an amazing thing. But like, I don't know. Is any of this making sense?
It is, but I'm kind of chuckling to myself because I'm imagining as you're talking about this, like your future like bachelor party where like your guys are like, yeah, we're going to bars, we're gonna like get messed up. And you're like, yeah, we're gonna get messed up, we're gonna get drunk, and then like you start putting on Apple TV Plus. They're like, wow, what's going on? It's like, oh yeah, just a minute, we're gonna put on some music. And then you just put on Cha Cha real smooth. And
also, speaking of, the soundtrack to this movie is extremely effective. Really good songs in this. I downloaded like 3, but you know what? Will, that you say that, but my bachelor party. Can I tell you? Because you're invited. I don't think you're going to come, but you're invited. And
oh wow.
It's not going to be going to the bars. It's not going to be that's not really my thing. No disrespect to anybody who's I've had friends do the whole bachelor party up in the town, but like for me, it's like I want to be in a cabin with my boys. We're gonna grill steaks. We're gonna drink beers. Nice. We're gonna go hiking. We're gonna go to like the beach and kayak like that. Those are like my favorite things to do with my groups of friends. So that's that. And yeah, no movies. No plans to watch movies, but I think that for me is like for me, like my going away parties, like when I moved away from the East Coast, it's like sitting around a campfire, listening to music, and just like talking, whatever, just like having really long conversations with guys. I think that stuff is so much fun, and it's like it's edifying. Because like when you have, I think like close male friendships, I think are so important. I think they're important. Like if you're a straight man, I think that you should have a good amount of male friendships because it's good for your partner. Like you're not putting all of your emotional weight onto the other person. Now we're kind of getting away from Cha Cha Real Smooth because that movie does not get into this, but I'm just kind of getting off on a personal tangent because I do think it's important. And,
yeah. Well, speaking of movies with patriarchal expectations, exceeding their home life and causing strife with the new generation, one of my personal favorite films from this year's Sundance was a movie, and I hope I'm pronouncing the title right, but Utama.
I was going to say Utama, but yeah, probably it could be anything because I don't know Quechua. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly, but that's the indigenous the indigenous language and the people who live in Bolivia, which Bolivia, of course, is a Spanish-speaking country predominantly, but it has an indigenous population that, of course, predates, when Spanish people were like colonizing and all that. I don't know the exact history, so I might be talking out of my butt here, but I think that's the case.
Well, I mean, the English translation of the title is Our Home. Our Home, yeah. And this is the debut, I believe, of a filmmaker, and I hope once again I'm pronouncing his name at least somewhat right. Alejandro Loaiza Gurlazi.
I was going to say Alejandro Loaiza Grisi, but I could be way off.
I have
yes.
No idea. But I mean, this movie, this is probably as close of discovery as I got from this year's Sundance because I kind of I was able to join the premiere somewhat last minute. I have a review. It's going to be up later this week as I've been writing it and kind of collecting my thoughts of the film throughout the weekend. But the movie itself, it's, as you mentioned, a Bolivian character drama sort of in the vein of like an old like late in life Western. I was kind of commenting to you. It's sort of like the type of movies I feel like Clint Eastwood's been trying to make.
Yeah, it's a postmodern Western.
Right.
You know, it's a little bit more contemplative about the genre.
Yeah, even to the point where it's like you see our lead like walking to sunset in the first shot. Like that's like it's a very deliberate thing that the movie is doing. But it's just generally kind of looking at this sort of like societal strife where there are these expectations where like he feels like he kind of has to provide for his family. Like he's lived this life as a llama farmer. And he has been raised and lived a life that's had certain expectations, but you see the land that he's like living in, it's just impoverished. It's just dried out for a number of reasons, not only economically and like environmentally, but just like, like it just feels like it's just this like really like a barren wasteland almost. Like it just like feels like there's nothing really going on here.
It's a fascinating, if I can interject, it's a fascinating depiction of depression on his part. Right.
Oh,
it's not the typical version. Yeah. Like his depression matches the landscape.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, what it feeds into each other as well. But he is ailing with some sort of disease. I don't know if they ever put a name to it, but clearly it's life threatening. He's been basically brushing it off for however many years at this point, or months, or whatever it is at this point.
I think it's smart that they don't put a name to it, right? Because it speaks to how the thing that is killing this way of life is sort of an unnamed disease of like many causes and implications.
Right. Yeah, but his grandson eventually gets into the picture. He's had a clearly difficult relationship with his own son for reasons that aren't really explored in the film. But there's this, kind of like new blood and old blood dynamic here, where it's like clearly, the grandson doesn't really understand his way of living, but he respects it in some respects or another. He's not quite equipped for it given his own personal upbringing, but he tries to help out. He tries to be a good grandson, but just like that generational strife, as I mentioned, is just inherently there. And that even comes down to whether the main character here should be seeking medical attention, leaving the town and doing his thing, even though it seems like the disease is pretty well off at this point and probably going to kill him no matter what. But yeah, I mean, it's just a really deep, fascinating film, and I find it so fascinating that it's a directorial debut. Just this idea of like, I don't know. I mean, not to put filmmakers in a box, but I feel like, like you see a movie like Cha Cha Real Smooth, which is obviously a sophomore film, but a lot of films coming from early filmmakers have, characters that are younger. This kind of explores like early in life. There are exceptions, of course, but there's these expectations. And this film has like a very weathered, mature, thoughtful vibe to it that if I had known this was a debut, I would have thought this was a guy's like, 10th or 12th film. And I think that's really a testament to his filmmaking and also just the film that he made in general. So I like this movie a lot. I feel like people, didn't hate it, but I feel like I am more positive than some other people I've talked to about it so far. But I feel like this is the type of film that the more people see it, the more people will respect it. And I hope you liked that. I think you said you enjoyed it at least. So
I liked it.
I don't know if you're as positive as I am, but
it was a slow burn.
For sure.
Slow burns can be hard with Sundance because you're going back. It's such a fast paced festival, and to like suddenly have to like kind of slow down. It took me a bit to like get into it. I did have a little bit of an issue with like some of the dialogue being a little bit too on the nose. Like there's a lot of stuff here of like, there's a story about a condor, and it just says like the whole theme of the movie to a point where I was also
like, I mean, you speak Spanish, so you probably understood the dialogue maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. So like, when the movie starts, it's in the indigenous language, Quechua, which I don't know how to say correctly again, but when Clever, the grandson, comes, he's speaking Spanish because, he lives in the city, and that's like, and it's revealed that they know Spanish. Like they're not ignorant. They're not like in a corner of the world unaware of what's going on. And it's a really effective way of saying like they choose to live this life because this way of life is important to them. But yeah, as we find out, like the grandfather is conflicted about like his usefulness, and if he can't do what he does, should he just die? And it's just like there's a lot of symbolism, there's a lot of overt text here that I was a little bit like, I wish it was a little bit more subtle. But I certainly like don't knock the film a lot for any of that, because I do think that it's a powerful message. And I do think that it's a little depressing. Like it's a little dour just to like see like a way of life that when going into the film, I didn't know anything about indigenous people in Bolivia.
Sure.
Like it's nothing I've ever thought of. I've never seen a film depict this way of life. Yeah. Right. But that is the beauty of films.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. I mean,
that's discovery.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about not only the film festival, but just films in general, is that you can see a film like this where like I have certainly no experience with Bolivian culture and this way of life. And just I to get that kind of, 90-minute experience. And this movie feels also so lived in as well. I think that's also a real testament to the filmmaker as well, that, it just feels like you're in like a whole other part of the world, quite literally in this case. And I think it's a really thoughtful, powerful film. And I can see why it's not getting like heaps of praise, but I can definitely see this one getting more of a response later on when people are seeing outside of the festival.
And I do want to find out, is it as true to this life as it comes across? Is the authenticity really there? Because I haven't seen a lot of films to this effect, I don't know. But I would hope, like as this film gets more, as people from Bolivia watch it, I hope that we can get a little bit more of like confirmation that's like, oh yeah, this is pretty true to life and authentic. Yeah. I got that vibe from the Q&A, but I'm not 100% sure,
Right.
But I certainly am taking it at face value. I think that the film certainly presents itself believably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it at least feels believable. But like I said, I'm by no means an expert on that, and I can't speak to that to any authority at all.
And hey, it was only 87 minutes, and it even though it was kind of like a slow burn, like I said, it's only 87 minutes. That was another thing of this festival. Not a lot of long films, which I liked.
Yeah, those movies, I mean, like, what was it? Like, Call Jane was like 2 hours.
Yeah, that was an outlier. Well, the longest thing I saw was We Need to Talk About Cosby, which I mentioned earlier, which I think is a good documentary. It's more of a documentary series that we're going to be seeing on Showtime. The first episode just dropped.
Right, I was going to say,
It's quite good. I think that it really does something very challenging. It's not one of my favorites, but that was like 4 hours. So because several episodes of like each episode I think is like an hour or something like that, and it's a hard watch, but it's like it gave me the full picture of Bill Cosby that I think I needed as somebody who certainly grew up always just sort of like Bill Cosby was just always there. It was always just sort of like, oh yeah, like the Cosby Show, Little Bill, Fat Albert, like all these things. The Kids Say the Darndest Things was like the big thing when I was a kid. And then, obviously everything that happened with Bill Cosby happened. And I think everybody was just sort of like, what? And I think this documentary is like about that. It's about like, hey, like this is the situation. And it like timelines and charts out the allegations. And it's amazing to me that people still deny, or they defend him. And I'm just like, it's not he said, she said. It's like 100 people said, and he said. Like, how in the world? I just think people are awful. Like to like defend this man and act like what he did is okay or that it didn't happen. It's just like, I don't know. Anybody who thinks that after watching something like this and actually going through this, I just think that it's despicable, because you are just knowingly, be in defense and like supporting somebody who I think is demonstrably an evil human being who did good things,
Right.
Like Bill Cosby, clearly, like we can't just say he was awful completely, but like,
Yeah, I mean, but like that's the other fascinating thing too. I mean, I haven't seen that documentary, but I mean, those allegations, there were court records about those going at least back to like 2000, right? Did they talk about that?
Even beforehand, and it's unbelievable, like what we found out over time, and just like how the stories all relate to each other. How like
allegations going back to the 60s, I think, right?
To the 60s, yes, because the 60s is when he like came into prominence, and you get like a history lesson, like a lot of stuff I didn't know. Like the first thing I knew about Bill Cosby was I Spy, the show, which I didn't know that much about, but like, he was doing stand up before then, and it was kind of it was like a meteoric rise, but the first allegation is while he was making the show I Spy. And the documentary goes from there. Yeah. So I do recommend it, but it's a hard watch.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see it. I don't know when. I didn't see it at the festival because, like you said, it's going to be on Showtime soon. So I just prioritize things that.
But you did see Kanye West. You did see Genius, a Kanye trilogy.
To be fair, for one, I didn't, when I reserved that ticket, I did not know it was going to be on Netflix in February. I was under the impression it was going to be later.
I mean, I'm not blasting you because I saw Genius.
Sure.
So,
yeah. And I mean, I like the first, I don't know if that's like a film per se or like the first part.
Yeah, it's an episodic kind of thing. We just saw the first episode of it, but it's long. It was an hour and a half. So it was long for a show.
It's feature length. Yeah. I mean,
the first episode is feature length.
I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about more when we can. I mean, at least I'm going to watch the next two. I don't know what you're going to do. I can't speak for you.
I'll keep watching it, yeah, but I'm reserving kind of judgment and criticism until I think it's an interesting start. But I honestly, like, I wasn't fully hooked, and I think that like the main guy in it is just kind of like chasing clout a little bit. But I could be wrong about
the filmmaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of wondering about that a little bit, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, I
have
do
nothing
think
against him, to be clear. Like I I'm not knocking the guy. I'm just kind of like, that's how it comes across. And like, I think he does a good job. Like, I'm not,
sure.
I'm not saying you can't do that.
I mean, I think the footage that he's able to gather is pretty incredible.
Right.
Even like, I mean, just like, I think people certainly have a image in mind when they think of Kanye West, whatever that is at this point. But, just seeing like young Kanye again, like this is before College Dropout, like just like him as a hungry artist, just really trying to push himself is just, it's fascinating just to see in that respect. And I am curious to see, like the second part I presume is going to follow like the meteor, the rise, as you mentioned, like of, leading up to probably, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and like the Taylor Swift incident and all that stuff. But I mean, it's definitely one that's on my radar at least. I liked and loved the documentary that we saw for it, but yeah, I prioritize it because Kanye West is one of my problematic faves. I saw that movie and the Lena Dunham movie within 24 hours of each other, and I was just like,
fave. Yeah.
It was just like, this is gonna be my problematic fave 24 hours, I guess, because I'm knocking these two out. So yeah.
I mean, the two other documentaries that I would put above that, or three documentaries I'll go over quick. Fire of Love, the one where the volcano scientist,
one of my
kind of cool
favorites. One of my favorites from the festival, I think.
Unfittingly cool romance. We'll probably have to talk about that more later. And then also the Princess Diana one, which I think I like more than other people do, I guess. But that was just like, it's an archive only sort of rundown of Princess Diana's life through the lens of like the media and the public reaction through the media. That I think it's a really good indictment of the media and a good overview of what happened with her. And then the other documentary, I mentioned the one about Boeing, Downfall, the case against Boeing. So yeah, those ones I think are pretty strong. I also, I like Lucy and Desi, the one, the Being the Ricardos sort of double feature fodder. I think Lucy and Desi is better than Being the Ricardos because I think that it's more accurate, and I think like the facts are there, and I think it's more fun to watch a documentary and like kind of like going back through like their lives in a more factual format. It's a standard documentary, but it has good content. But anyway, I got a documentary that I want to talk about here, and this is probably my favorite of the entire festival, is Aftershock. There is one more movie I do want to talk about after this, but I got to bring up Aftershock now since we're on the subject of documentaries. This won the U.S. Documentary Special Jury Award, Impact for Change. And it's one of those documentaries that I mentioned earlier where it's like, it's a social issue documentary. It's taking a single starting point for a problem in society, a societal problem that's impacting people. And it's just sort of unpacking it. And the message behind the film, the thing that it's tackling is that young Black women and older Black women too, to an extent, are facing higher mortality rates in childbirth than white women in America. And like when you hear that, that can be kind of like polarizing, right? There can almost be this sort of like instinctual, like I saw a little bit of this, like people were just sort of not watching this and just being like, well, that data is skewed, or like people are kind of coming out, and not a lot of people, but like, racist people, we're kind of coming out and just being like, it's not really a problem. It's just, it's not because of racism. It's because of excuse number one, excuse number two. This is one of those documentaries that I think really takes aim at that sort of thing. And it's just like, no, here's the data. Here are the testimonials. Here's what's happening. Here's what these people are going through. where like healthcare professionals are ignoring them when they're coming to them with their problems. You know, one of the most fascinating things about this documentary is how it tackles really like the way that the healthcare industry is prioritizing profit over healthcare. It's prioritizing like C-sections in situations where they're not necessary. Which to be totally clear, like C-sections, this documentary says this, C-sections can save lives, but a lot of times what happens and what can cause complications and death is C-sections that are not necessary and have surgical issues and lead to people dying. And in cases where the hospital makes more money from C-sections than they do from vaginal childbirth. And so this is a documentary sort of about how people of color, particularly Black people in America, Black women, are essentially just like dying by like an absurd rate. Like when this documentary goes through the data of how America compares to other countries on this, it's appalling. Like it's one of those things you watch and you're like, how is this not, on the front page of every newspaper? I know newspapers don't really, but like this documentary talks about that. And it's like, yeah, it's in the news. Like there are media stories about it. I have heard about it before, but it's one of those things where it's just like people hear about it and they don't do anything about it. And one thing I really like about this documentary is that it's not all bleak. It's also about the action. It's about like, okay, here's what people are trying to do. And I found a lot of optimism and a lot of hope in this documentary, but like reasoned hope of like, here are things that like ways that we can reshape the way that the healthcare system works, like creating places in certain communities all over the country for everybody that prioritize like funding and childbirth services, that like instead of like going to a hospital and like sort of being like in a corner of the hospital and not getting the best care, having places that are designed to sort of accomplish successful childbirth rates and really like sink or swim based on that. And it's like incentives. It's about economics. It's about things that would lead to people having successful outcomes with childbirth in a way that like I'm thinking about a lot, like I'm going to have kids, hopefully, we'll see what happens. But like, I'm certainly in a stage in my life where I think that is on the table for me coming up. And watching this documentary like really scared me, in a good way. And it really like plucked at a lot of strings of like what people are going through and how privileged a lot of people, especially like me, are to like take that sort of thing for granted. And it shouldn't be. It's one of those things that like you don't think is like an issue. Like I shouldn't say you, but like I think a lot of people in this country don't really, like a lot of people who don't see this, right? And so this is one of those documentaries that I think will illuminate the issue for people like me who were kind of like buried in the sand about it. And so obviously I feel bad about that, but I can't just sort of like sit here and feel guilty. You got to actually like, I want to spread the word about this documentary. I think that people should see it. I think it's a hard watch, but I think it's a must see because I think it is one of those documentaries that like will genuinely be like something in your tool belt, to like sort of promote and to sort of help like spread like understanding and knowledge and information on this issue. So yeah, Aftershock, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, this one wasn't on my radar until you started hyping it up. So I'm definitely excited to see it when I can.
Cool. And then what else do you got? I think we're kind of coming up on our last ones.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there's one film that I think is in both of our favorites. So I'll probably wait to talk about that one at the end.
Oh, I think I know. Yeah. I was saving that for last.
Yeah, I think we'll just save that one for the end. So I'll go with my other favorite of the fest. Hang on one second, make sure I got my list right. Oh yeah, okay. So the other one that I really liked, and I don't think it's one I'm going to be like thinking about a lot throughout the year, but I feel it's going to be one that's probably going to get considerable awards attention later on in the year, and a movie that I imagine will get a decent amount of clout later in the year is Living. Which, did you see that one or not? I forget. Living? No. Yeah. Okay. Living's one of the ones you didn't see. Yeah, that's the Bill Nighy film that is a remake of the Kurosawa film. Is it pronounced Ikaru or? I
think you pronounce it Ikiru. The 1952 film?
Yeah. Yeah. is transporting that story to 1952 London. We follow Bill Nighy's character, who is this mild-mannered, soft-spoken accounting sort of guy who has basically lived his whole life behind a desk, realizes that he has this terminal illness that's going to kill him in 6 months, and realizes that he has basically not lived a life well lived. He has, feared basically his economic stability so much that he hasn't really indulged in what he felt life should be. So he tries to cram as much life as possible within the last remaining months of his life. And it's just a really soft, lyrical, gentle, moving film. It's not one that's like blowing my mind or anything in terms of like what it pulls off, but there is an opening sequence at the beginning of this is like a grand old-fashioned Technicolor opening that it just instantly kind of won me over from the get-go. And then from there, just really took me by surprise in a lot of good ways. And I think obviously the big key here is Bill Nighy's performance, which is, I think, one of his best to date, which is, saying something given the pedigree of Bill Nighy's credibility as an actor. But I think he just really gets a great showcase here to prove why he is an actor of such renown. And he is complemented by some gorgeous cinematography, some really nice, lovely period details, and just a very elegant, thoughtful, witty screenplay that I'm planning to check out the Kurosawa film later because I actually haven't seen it for myself. But
I feel like this milestone. I mean, it's 1952. So
I was gonna say, if you want to bring that back and talk about it, be curious.
Because I haven't seen it either, but I'm aware of it for sure.
Yeah, I definitely want to check it out to compare the films, and I imagine that film ultimately is better, but this feels like one of the rare, remakes that feels worthy of the original film. So I like that one quite a lot, and I imagine it'll get more play later in the year, given the pedigree behind it. I know Sony Picture Classics picked it up, which makes a lot of sense. That was one that I quite enjoyed, and I imagine you'll like it too. So
I'm definitely interested.
To see what you think.
Yeah, I do want to see it. I don't think I saw anybody disliking it, but it was just one of those movies where I was kind of like, I feel like I could put this off, but certainly, I could see myself liking it quite a bit. I like Kurosawa, so I'm a little skeptical whenever it comes to Kurosawa and people trying to like adapt his stuff, but it can work out. We got one good Magnificent Seven movie, right? So anything's possible. We did get, two, Bug's Life. But okay, I think our last one is shared between the two of us.
Yeah, which is surprising considering that the buzz around the movie is fairly muted.
It's surprising? Is it, wait, it's muted? I thought people liked this movie. Should we say what it is?
Some people do. Not a lot of people are like loving it the way that I feel like I have, and I guess you are.
I'm on my Letterboxd, and I'm seeing some people kind of low rate it. So to your point, but the people who low rated it are not people that I'm usually like there are a couple people here I'll say where I'm just like, if they liked it, I feel pretty good about that. Other people where I'm just like, that's fine.
Okay. Anyway,
I won't call them out by name, but Duel.
Yeah.
Dual. Yes. I really dug this movie. This is Riley Stearns' film, his follow-up to Art of Self-Defense. Good movie, Art of Self-Defense. I like that one quite a bit with Jesse Eisenberg.
Yes.
He and Jesse, they were competing this year, Started as friends. Not anymore. I don't know about that, but this movie stars Karen Gillan. Really stars Karen Gillan. She's the star of the show here. Also, Aaron Paul, who was not in it nearly as much as I thought he would be, but he makes... He's in maybe like 15 minutes of the film all put together. He makes the most of it. He really does.
Yeah, I mean, I saw someone or maybe a few people say that his performance looked uncomfortable, but I thought that was like sort of the point. Like he's like this weird, like clenched
I wouldn't
dude.
say uncomfortable. I thought it was kind of unnerving to some extent.
Right.
But I mean, it's an unnerving movie. So,
but that's what I mean. Like he's using that like intensity that you would expect for something like, Jesse Pinkman, but just for like this guy who is, this out of left field, offbeat.
I didn't get any
combat
Jesse Pinkman from this.
No, I'm not talking Jesse Pinkman in terms of like the character, but like this intensity that he brings to a part like Jesse Pinkman.
Yeah, there is an intensity. I think that it really does match sort of like this movie has a vibe. It has like a sort of like this world is not our own. Like you watch this movie and like you have to understand, I think, right away. And I think a lot of people who are disliking it do understand this, to be clear. I don't think that they're bad faith reviewing it. Well, but I do think that there is a wavelength. There's a sort of like people talk a certain way in this movie that is normal in this movie.
Yes, a very
that is not normal in the real world.
Dry sort of manner of speaking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's sort of like baby's first Yorgos Lanthimos in some ways. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I'm just saying that it's like it's taking an element of that of his playbook as a director. That's sort of like something's off, and I like it kind of mood that he likes. That's what
I mean, that's the thing for me is that like I've seen the people who are dismissing it or critical of it. And to be clear, people are allowed to dislike the movie. I'm not trying to take that away from
anybody. We're not going to come down on you. We're not going to crack down.
But I'm seeing the people who are critical of the movie being like, oh, he's just trying to do his like a parody or like a cliche ripoff of Yorgos Lanthimos' style, which I mean, he's definitely taking cues from Lanthimos.
Yeah, I think he's playing in that sandbox, which is totally fair.
Like there's one sequence in here that's like directly ripped off from Alps, basically. And there's like, obviously I think the premise of the movie, it's, very reminiscent of Dogtooth and Lobster. But
at the same time, it has a lot of Sterns in it. I don't think that it's just,
there's that too,
Lanthimos Jr.
But also, like, I feel like similar to how I felt about Apples a couple years ago when I saw that TIFF, I feel like he is using that style, but using it for the same way that he is, which is making this, very thoughtful social allegory that it doesn't feel like he's just cripping the style just for the sake of it. He's using that social allegory in a very patient and thoughtful and funny way. And I think that's where it feels like a proper tribute to Yorgos Lanthimos' style.
The story of Duel is that Karen Gillan is a hot mess in every sense of the word. And she finds out she's going to pass away. It's kind of like taking the theme of, or not the theme, but I guess the plot of, or the synopsis of Swan Song, the Mahershala Ali, Benjamin Cleary one, where she's going to die.
It's funny that two movies from this year's festival reminded me of Swan Song. This one and After Yang.
Oh yeah, that's true. Not as much. I was thinking, well, After Yang in terms of aesthetic, I guess.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, because I felt like watching After Yang, I was like, I couldn't quite put this in the words, but I feel like this is what I wanted from Swan Song.
But that's the thing. It's like
aesthetic. Yeah.
So the idea is that she is going to die, so she makes a clone of herself through this company in order to like have a replacement for herself. So her family doesn't have to grieve her. But like in Swan Song, that's kind of like a touching thing. It's kind of like oh, he's doing this for them, and it's a drama. It's about family. In this movie, she's just kind of doing it. Like she's just sort of like, I think this is the right thing to do. But it's like it's a dark comedy. It's like a very like, not a satire, but it's sort of like playing off of her sort of insecurities of, I'm a person in this world. I haven't done anything. What is that mood, that you and I have talked about in so many films of like being in your late 20s, early 30s, feeling like you haven't accomplished anything and sort of like doing whatever you can, buying something or putting yourself into something that you think will redeem your standing in the world, your legacy. And that's what she decides to do. And so she has this like clone, and ultimately we won't say how, but she finds herself in a competition with this clone, and she has to like train herself to be able to like overcome the clone. And I think what's interesting about this movie, and I've been chewing on this a bit, it's not something that I think ruins the movie for me at all, because clearly I really like it. What is with the clone thing right now? Like, I'm trying to uncover or unpack, like, what is it about cloning that is like on filmmakers' minds? Why are they thinking about this specifically? I can make some guesses, like some educated guesses about why it's something that like sci-fi is trying to get into, of like, what's the purpose of like an artificial person and humanity? But do you have a thought on that?
It's about the duality of man, or in this case, woman.
Thanks, Will. That really helps.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I think it's this idea of like, especially now in the social media age, I think there is this kind of expectation where like there's you and then there's like how you project yourself.
It's who you want to be. It's like the perfect version of yourself. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's all of it, but I think that is a key part of why it's becoming such a prevalent storyline in today's culture and social media, or just because of social media. I think that's such a key thing in most people's lives, and that's something that I think a lot of people think about. Like there's like this sense that like we're always have to be like two people at one time, almost, if you are online a lot, like probably we are. So I mean that would be my read of it, at least.
That was my read. I guess not super specifically, but like I was thinking about that. I was thinking about how
not for this movie, but like why clones are so popular.
Well, I think for this movie, my mind was less on the social media thing, but more on the sort of more general, more of, because this movie doesn't really play with social media. It's sort of just like there is the person that you think you're supposed to be at this age. You know, the person that your family wants you to be, the person that your partner wants you to be. Obviously, social media is something that exasperates that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But this movie is sort of about like in a competition between you and your best self, who wins. And I think that's a really cool premise. And I think this movie really pulls that off. And it's sort of about like, what are the things that make us, you know? And I think people need to avoid reading the film as a literal sort of like sci-fi rendition of like what if cloning was a thing. It's not that. Like, it really isn't, because it's obviously making fun of it, you know, like the whole idea of like a duel between you and your clone. It's obviously a joke, and I think people are taking it more seriously than I did, which I don't know if that's a problem with me or
I don't know. I mean, I think this movie is very funny. I mean, you know, it's
so
like
funny. Oh my gosh,
maybe it's like
so much in this movie.
Oh, I think it's really funny, and I think, you know, the script is very smart and very compact. But you know, I mean, comedy is subjective, so I can't, you know, if people don't find it funny, that's you know, that's their battle.
This movie wins me, but I gotta say, with the ending, I think the ending, I think you don't want
kind of divisive for people, I think,
but I think it's right. It's the correct ending.
I think so too,
and I think that it would be an inferior film otherwise. And obviously we can't say more, but I do think it's like, I don't want to say correct, but it's good.
I think they could have ended it with the expected ending without giving anything away, and I think that would have been fine.
Right.
But I think
it's fine though.
It plays. Yeah, I think it plays into what this movie is for me, which is basically the way I look at it. Like, there's a sense that like for Karen Gillan's character, she's not living life to her fullest. If anything, she's kind of like living her life, obviously, like indulging in a lot of like fast food and like bad life choices, and
so, like,
you know, just making a lot of choices. Sure. But like, there's a sense that like she's dying and she's not really upset by it, because like there wasn't really much life that she lived anyway.
Right.
But there's this expectation of like, well, her life sucks, but it's like, well, what else do we really got? Like, life is life. Like, it may suck for us, but we just kind of have to like fight for it anyway, because it's ours. And it's something that we can claim ownership to. And this idea that like, you know, she wants to kind of create her narrative, but like the idea, like what people want from her, what people expect from her, even her own family, goes outside of her reach. And then like, she's not really like jazzed about being in a duel for her own sake, but it's like, well, what else does she really got going for her anyway? And it's like, you know, like that.
Well.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, I love that using the Lanthimos style for this is like, it takes this obviously very outlandish premise, but dials it back to where it's like, it's not really believable, but like everyone plays it straight enough to where it's like, okay, like we're all kind of taking this at face value, and obviously like we're all just kind of expecting to do this, and that heightens to what I like a lot about Lanthimos movies, which is just basically like life on its face is obviously just absurd to begin with, and we just don't really recognize it as that, because like we just live in just like life is just like silly. And then he just plays it where it's just like, if you live in the world as it is, like it's not really silly to you, because it's just what life is. And I think, you know, the people who take that lesson from his movies, I think they tend to favor better than not. And I think that's something that's Stearns really captures well with this movie.
I couldn't agree more. And I think we should really be clear. We've mentioned this, but I got to reiterate, Karen Gillan, incredibly good in this. Like, I'm watching her in this movie, and like, obviously she's clearly somebody, she's been very successful. She's been in a lot of great things. You know, I think the Guardians movies, the Marvel movies have been good to her in terms of like boosting her star power. But I just think this is one of those actors who her full potential is like there. You know, I see it in this movie, and I could see like more and more of these like indie films, like really just letting her blossom. I think Party's just beginning. Not a movie I saw. I think you saw it though, right? Yeah, that's the one that she directed.
Yeah, I think she's a talented director as well.
I want to see that, you know, just based on seeing this work, because I just think that she's an actor or an artist, a creative person who, even when she's the actor in a film, is obviously like in tune with the human experience in a way that is like fundamentally interesting, at least to me. So yeah, Duel's really good. I think that like people should not be precious about the Yorgos Lanthimos thing. It's okay to tribute or like sort of, you know, try to like be in that same sort of zone. I want more stuff like that anyway. I don't want only Yorgos Lanthimos to make films that are like his films. I think he clearly has inspired a lot of other directors. And say what you want about Riley Stearns, I think that Art of Self-Defense had some particular issues in terms of like how to depict certain things, particularly with the Imogen Poots character. But in Duel, I think that he clearly is like growing. Like I see a sizable improvement, because Art of Self-Defense, I think, is like that's kind of a cool movie. That's an interesting. I kind of like that. Where I watch Duel and I'm just like, oh man, this is great. So yeah, I'm very into it.
Yeah, but I do find it odd, to your earlier point, that like people seem to be more willing to buy into the metaphor for that one without any trouble for the most part. But with this one, it kind of trips them up a bit. And I don't know what that is or why that is, because I don't know, maybe it's just because like the Art of Self-Defense had kind of more of like a Jody Hill, Mike Judge kind of vibe to it more than Lanthimos. But yeah, I don't know. It's just something, for whatever reason, it just seems like this one is holding some people back, and I'm not quite sure why, because I agree. I think it's as good, if not better, than the Art of Self-Defense. And I think he is obviously growing as a filmmaker.
I think it's better. It has more moments. Like, there's no moment in Art of Self-Defense that comes even close to Karen Gillan teaching Aaron Paul hip hop. Let's be real.
A lot of good dance moments in this year's Sundance thing.
Like Karen Gillan knows how to dance.
I think After Yang probably had the best dance sequence.
That's true. Film. That one was jaw dropping.
But Fresh had a great dance scene. Obviously, there's a lot of dancing in Cha Cha Real Smooth.
I was dancing watching these movies. There was so much good music.
I mean, you know, it should come as a surprise, but this is the Sundance Film Festival,
there it is. I was wondering if you were gonna. Yeah. Okay. Let's finish this out. We've gone over quite a bit.
Biggest disappointment? You want to do that one real quick?
As long as it's real quick. I can't say Alice was the biggest disappointment. For me, because I didn't have high hopes.
Summering was the biggest disappointment. I think Alice was the worst.
Thinking Summering, but I didn't have high expectations for Summering. I was kind of looking forward to it because it's the end of the tour guide. But at the same time, I was like, the premise had me sort of like, I don't know about this.
And he's coming off of The Circle, which wasn't either.
And like 892 and Master, I thought were good. I certainly wasn't like, I'm sad that this wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. I thought it was still good. I think Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul. I feel like that movie should have been one of my favorite movies of the whole festival. Instead, I had so many problems with it, even though I really liked it. It's confusing. And I really love Sterling K. Brown. I really love Regina Hall in it. But that movie was just missing something. It was one of those things where I think that like it's missing one or two things that would make it incredible. But instead, it's just only good. And I think that I'm just sad about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like that movie for Honk for Jesus Savior. So I feel like it was too broad and it didn't feel quite specific enough in its commentary to really hone in on what it was saying. I also felt like a lot of stuff it was saying was kind of maybe not outdated, but just feels kind of like, I don't know, we've kind of done this already. Like a lot of like stuff that's like, I don't know. I don't want to give anything away in particular because I feel like the movie's going to get a fairly wide release, whether it's like through Netflix or Amazon or whomever picks it up. But I just felt like there was such rich potential with that movie. And I haven't seen the short film that's based on it, but I heard it's a little bit more wry with how it handles the subject matter. And it seems like that was somewhat lost in the process of making it a feature-length film. So, I don't know.
That's my thinking as well, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Watcher was a movie that like I didn't have high expectations, but I thought the beginning was so strong that I was disappointed because then the rest of the movie I thought was so weak, right? And so I was very sad with Watcher.
Looks nice.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, slick movie, but I feel like that was kind of to its detriment. Like, I think it needed kind of that like grime or something to really hone in on that 70s like paranoia thing.
It has a few things in it though where I was just like, oh gosh.
It just felt too clean to me. Like, it felt like it was like it needs that dirt. It needs some gruff to it. I don't know.
Agreed. You Won't Be Alone, which I think I really disliked, even though like there are things about it that I think are really cool, and I don't dislike the premise. I think that it's just too Terrence Malick for me, a person who just does not respond to Terrence Malick.
And that's one of our biggest points of contention. I
think so. And sorry, to be clear, this is not a Terrence Malick movie, but it is.
Oh yeah, no, not at all involved. I think
no. But it is like it's very much in that zone.
I mean, I think Malick is one of our most empathetic and moving filmmakers. I know you disagree, but
frustrating.
I don't know, man. Malick moves me in a way that few other filmmakers do. But
I love that for you. But no, this was from Goran Stolevsky, who's made a few other films. I haven't seen his other ones, but
okay. But yeah, I mean, I feel like a Malickian folk horror character study in the vein of like something like Under the Skin should have been 100% my thing, and it's like 60 or 70% my thing in this movie. And I think that's the film's fault. I don't think that's me. Could be me because I was like 20 something movies into the festival or whatever, but I just didn't quite click with it. But I liked it overall. And
I was like, please God, stop. I'm so tired of you.
Oh man. But I mean, there was I mean, I'm very curious to see what the response is. I imagine it's going to make like a $1.50 in theaters because this is not a crowd pleaser.
It's not that different from a movie like The Witch in terms of what it's about, but clearly like not made with the same, like it doesn't have that same sort of appeal.
I think Focus Features bought this being like, oh, this is our Witch.
Yeah.
We're going to get in on the ground level here.
They miscalculated.
We got ourselves a winner, and they I think picked up a movie that is more what's the word? It's more alienating, I think, than The Witch is, and certainly less crowd pleasing. Which is, you know, I mean, I think most people like The Witch, but I still kind of find it surprising that movie became like a huge hit because that is a fairly alienating film in its own right.
I think, literally my Letterboxd review of this movie, I said, would you like to live surreptitiously? And that speaks to, I think The Witch had a little bit of like a pop culture, like it broke through a noise
and to
a
be
little
clear,
bit, you know?
I mean, I like that movie a lot. I mean, obviously I love folk horror.
And you love Robert Eggers, don't you?
Sure. I mean, I'm very excited for The Northman.
He's 2 for 2 with you, huh?
Yeah. You see the Northman trailer?
I haven't seen the trailer, no, but I've heard it's quite good, so.
Looks like a kick-ass movie. I'm going to tell you that right now. But I'm very excited for that film. Has nothing to do with You Won't Be Alone, which is, I think, a fine film. I can definitely respect anyone that doesn't like this movie at all.
I already mentioned a bunch of other films, but I did want to say, in terms of disappointing, Brainwashed, Sex, Camera Power. You know, I was kind of ranting to you about it, like before we started recording. This is basically one of those documentaries. It's like a TED Talk that they turn into a documentary, and it's so frustrating because like there are things in it. Nina Menkes made this. Nina Menkes, she made Queen of Diamonds and a few other films. She's basically trying to she's making an argument of saying how it's a film history kind of documentary. It's kind of not in the style of black horror noir or horror noir. You know, like that documentary was sort of about the history of like black horror and sort of how that has like changed over the decades. It's kind of similar to like Disclosure, which is about trans representation in films. This movie is sort of about like the male gaze over the course of film history. The thing with this documentary is there's stuff in it that I think is very interesting. There's some really good points made. There's some good film sort of analysis going on here and there. Half the time, this documentary is nonsense. Like I'm watching this and I'm like, this person, she doesn't know what, she's a filmmaker, right? She's made films. She's older than I am. I think it's weird because I think she's smarter clearly than I am. I don't think I'm smarter than this person, but I think like, I don't know what to make of it. I feel like she's willfully sort of like distorting film history to make arguments, to sort of persuade people on sort of this like idea of how she perceives the male gaze, which obviously is a real thing and it's an important thing. But she's like making connections between certain films and female filmmakers too, and sort of like the proliferation, the dominance of like terrible things that are going on in like the Hollywood industry, and but also like rape culture in general. And like she's trying to like connect things like by force, like jamming things together. I think misrepresenting certain films out of context. There's just a lot of negligence in this. And the problem is that it's for a good cause, because I think that it's like the points she's making are right, but I think that the arguments she's making are terrible. And what worries me is that like, I think people like me and you and others will watch it and sort of like, you know, I feel like it's preaching a little bit to the choir. Obviously, there's way more edifying that, you know, way more that like you and I need to learn about certain things that like we take for granted, and like certain things that we don't even understand about the female gaze and the male gaze and all of that. That said, I think that like I'm speaking for you, but I feel like your heart is in the right place. I want to say that my heart is in the right place of like, we're all moving toward the same goal of like representation in film that doesn't like advance things that I think are for the worse. I think this documentary, though, people are going to watch it, and it's the people that it needs to change the minds of are going to watch this and just not get the message, because I think it's so poorly argued. And so that's my take on it. I kind of have to defer a little bit because I don't know how much of that is an emotional reaction for me, because it's like an emotional reaction built off of an intellectual reaction. And obviously, like, I don't perceive myself as the smartest person in terms of like all of this stuff. So a lot of it could be my own ignorance, but I got to be honest. Like, I was watching this and I found myself really frustrated because I really don't want like the good intentions here and like the analysis, the nuggets of really good insight here to be overshadowed by things that I think are just wildly off base. And I really hope people don't watch this and are just sort of like, you know, clapping along and not approaching it critically. That's something that really worries me, because I think sometimes my guys, my fellow boys can do that because it's easier. You know what I mean? It's easier to just sort of like agree, you know, even if you don't really agree, and to sort of not engage with something, you know, in a way that is like true to how you're feeling about it. It doesn't mean that you need to like lash out and sort of like speak without thinking. But I do think that like, if my personal opinion, I think that if you watch something and it challenges you, you should contemplate it and think about it and not talk about it with other people first, you know, but really like sit with it and process. So I did that with this, and I kind of came out the other end just really frustrated, but sorry, long tangent. Brainwash, Sex, Camera, Power, the TED Talk documentary that I did not like.
Well, that was Sundance.
Sundance. But hey, one movie we didn't talk about, we both saw, and there's plenty of others we didn't talk about that I'm sure they'll come up later in the show this year. But Emily the Criminal, Aubrey Plaza.
Oh yeah.
I really dug that movie. I thought that was really good. And I like,
thought it was pretty
not
good.
Amazing, but I really liked it.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I mean, yeah. I just wish it didn't play out exactly as I thought by each scene.
Yeah, that was
it just felt like I like the commentary on late capitalism. I thought Aubrey Plaza was good. I don't think she was like amazing in the movie. I feel some people have been
not amazing, but I think certainly a cut above. I think it's like, I mean, I just not as good as her Black Bear performance, but certainly like more committed in some ways.
Well, I don't know. I just have heard some people be like, this is her best performance today. And I'm like, this does not compete with Black Bear or It Goes West.
Yeah, those are still the high pinnacle, but those are really good performances. Right. So the fact that this comes close,
this is a good one. Yeah, this is a good performance. I'm just saying it's not her best.
No, I mean, and it paves the way, right? Like, I think that like she could be doing more fun genre stuff like this, that like this kind of like crime drama stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this could get a wider, more receptive audience than her previous films. So this could be something like, I don't think it is on par with Uncut Gems, but I could see this movie being for her, like something like what Adam Sandler was for Uncut Gems, where people like other people outside of like our film niche circles to be seeing it and be like, oh wow, she can do dramatic work. Like I didn't see this.
She has that recognize. She has that recognized. You know that what's the recognition? Like she's recognizable. Like I think she has that appeal. Like I think people see her and they expect something from her. And I think there should be more. She should get more projects like this that like capitalize, I think, on her charisma.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think she also produced Ingrid Goes West and Black Bear, but I feel like they highlighted that she produced this movie more than those ones. So
did they? I didn't get that sense, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, just from like the like opening stuff and all that before the movie. But anyway, yeah, I thought it was a pretty good film. I don't. Okay, did you not watch any of the intros?
I did sometimes, but yeah, not everything. Sometimes I was in a hurry, Will Ashton. Don't look at me all judgmentally. Sometimes I was I don't got time. I gotta skip ahead. 6
I like
minutes.
those little intros because they give me a little bit of breathing room. Like I can get my food or like send messages and like, but I also watch them too. I don't want to like make it seem like I didn't pay attention or whatever. I mean, like they gave me enough breathing room to where like I can get settled into the movie, but also I kind of like hearing what the director has to say about a film before that starts.
I watched a lot of the Q&As. But yeah,
okay, I didn't watch any of the Q&As.
That was more my deal. So I wanted to get right into the movie, not really have that sort of like I didn't like a lot. I skipped a lot of the director intros. I only saw a few, but the reason is because I don't want to hear from the director until after the movie. That's just me. But I understand.
I mean, if I had more time, I would have watched the Q&As. I just didn't really have that option, I feel like.
I hear you. I kind of like listen to because the Q&As are on YouTube. And if you see any of these movies, I do recommend you check the Q&As out after because I would just like put them up on YouTube and I'd listen to them while I was doing something else, like around the house. So. Okay.
I might do that throughout the week because, I like listening to like things while I work and stuff. And I'd be curious, certainly with some of these movies to hear what was going on in their heads when they were making these.
Yeah, there were a few movies where I had to, like, I was like, I need to, because I didn't know how else to process the movie. I was like that with Nanny. But
okay, I was gonna say name names, but I'm guessing I was gonna guess Nanny. And I was gonna guess After Yang.
After Yang, I did. Yeah, I did. Okay. That one and Cha Cha Real Smooth. I watched like 2 Q&As for that because I was so curious. Master, I did for sure. But okay, anyway. That's Sundance. We talked about our favorite movies. We talked about our disappointment. We talked about a lot. It was a big episode. We
talked about most of the movies we covered or we saw.
Yeah, barely any we didn't get to. Like we didn't talk about Neptune Frost. Like we didn't even mention it. We didn't mention. I didn't really get into Girl Picture or Fire of Love. Yeah, just kind of name dropping here and there. There were a bunch here like Second Chance. We didn't bring up. Nothing compares. But again, we'll get into all that stuff later. For now, though, we got to call it quits. I feel though like I'm glad we covered as much as we did. But yeah, nothing really to plug this week. Just follow us on the social media stuff. We'll be back next week, I think, to talk about Moonfall, Jackass, Forever, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I don't know how we're going to handle those because I'm seeing Moonfall, you're seeing Jackass. I don't know if you're seeing Moonfall, and I'm not seeing Jackass, so we might be doing something kind of fun this weekend. I don't know.
Are you not seeing Jackass at all?
I don't want to watch it, no.
Why not? They're fun movies.
I just don't want to. I know I'm whining, but like I've never seen the Jackass movies, and I don't have an interest.
They're fun.
But
they're fun movies, man.
What if I don't watch? I don't know. Johnny Knoxville. I saw The Ringer. Does that count?
Not really, but at the very least, watch number 2 because number 2 is an amazing work of art.
If there is another movie, there is Sundown, the Tim Roth movie, but then also
I want to see that.
We could drop or mention Charlie XCX Alone Together, which we've talked about on the show before because that was South by Southwest. I was going to
say the Fallout came to HBO Max. So
I forgot about that.
But I'm also going to be seeing Parallel Mothers hopefully this week. So
I'm excited for you to see that. I'm very excited for you to see that. So yeah, we have some stuff that we could get into aside from those two. Those are like Jackass and Moonfall are kind of like the blockbustery movies.
Yeah.
So we'll figure it out.
We covered Worst Person in the World. If you want to hear our thoughts, you can listen to them right now. So
true. But no, you'll have to wait to hear what we have to say about Kevin James in Home Team, which is a Netflix movie that we are not going to watch.
Yeah, I'm not watching it.
That's Taylor Lautner is in it. Taylor Lautner. He's back.
Yeah,
you're not excited?
He was in didn't he get acquired with the Happy Madison thing with Grown Ups 2 and Ridiculous 6?
He was Ridiculous 6. That was like the last thing. That was years ago. And then before that, where was he? I don't know. He got engaged. Anyway,
that's what I say. He was in Grown Ups 2. Remember?
Yeah, but that was before. Like way before.
I know.
Grown Ups 2 was like so long ago. What I'm saying is he hasn't been around. How's he doing? I don't know.
He wasn't in he wasn't in the Shark Boy and Lava Girl thing. Remember?
That was a big disappointment, and for me at least.
Everyone.
All right, let's get out of here.
Down with that one.
Let's stop this. Okay, from the Internet California, I'm John Negurni.
And from the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Wes.
See you next time.